Good morning, members. Are we all ready? I'm about to start today's meeting. Trust everybody is ready to start. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to today's Metro Outer Development Assessment panel. I will officially open today's meeting at 9:34 a.m. And I would like to acknowledge we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. Today's meeting will be run in accordance with DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development DAP Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development DAP Regulations 2011. Panel members, you are able to refer to your devices throughout the meeting to assist you in considering the material before you. The meeting today is in two parts. Our first part, Part C, comprises of Councillor Mark Jones, Part B, Councillor David Good, welcome. Councillor Karen Bayans, welcome, both online. Also online we have Jean Coltas, the Deputy Presiding Member. In the room to my immediate left we have Tony Arias, Specialist Member, and my name is Francesca Lafanti, Presiding Member. We have no apologies for this part of the meeting, and I will deal with Part C when we get to that. We have two separate members for that. There are no members on leave of absence, and the minutes for this meeting, as with other meetings, will be available on the website. We will move now to Part B, and it's dealing with an item from the City of Gosnells. Members, can I have a show of hands that you have duly considered all documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and Part B related information? That is unanimous for the minute taker. Members, there are no disclosures received at this point, and I'll invite members to advise if you have any declarations. I'll first go to both Councillors Karen Bayans and Councillor David Good. Did this matter go to a council meeting for any consideration?
I've seen no evidence of that.
No, I have not.
Thank you. Do you have any interests in relation to this matter?
No.
No.
Thank you. I'll go to Member Jean Coltas online. Do you have any interest disclosures in relation to this matter?
None at all, thank you.
And in the room, any disclosures of interest?
No,
Nil disclosures of interest in relation to this matter. We will move immediately through to our application. It is item 3.1 in Albany Highway, Rockingham. It's a private recreation facility. We have one presentation, Mr. Alessandro Stagno, who will present to us. As you are aware, in accordance with the DAP standing orders, there is a 3-minute timeline. You have provided the material, we have read it. I'm sure you will stay within your 3 minutes. I'm going to hand over to yourself. At the conclusion of that, there'll be opportunity for panel members to ask questions. We will then move to city officers, Brenton Scrambler and Liam Hertzfield, for further discussion. Over to yourself for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Presiding Member. Good morning, panel members, and good morning to council staff on this conference. I'm the applicant of the proposal for a new right-of-way gym proposed at number 155 Albany Highway, Beckenham, before the Metro Outer DAP with a recommendation for approval conditions. Not much to say. The City of Gosnells RAR is very well prepared, addresses all the key planning considerations and sets out sound reasoning for the approval of this development. The site is outdated, is in need of a good refresh, and this is a high quality development that we're excited and the proponent's excited to deliver. We're not looking to request any modifications to the conditions at this point in time. More than happy to answer any questions that the panel members may have.
Thank you. Panel members, do you have any questions to this presenter?
None from me, thanks, Presiding Member.
Thank you. I have one question to you. My question relates to a couple of conditions. And I'm specifically referring to, have a similar question to the officers. I'm referring to condition 6 and condition 11. Can you provide some comments in relation to the condition which requires a solid masonry, condition 6 requiring a solid masonry fence, and the acoustic report, which is condition 11, talking about a 1.8 double panelled fence. Could you speak to that aspect? And have you got any comments in relation to those conditions? I have a similar question to the officers, just for clarity, because they are inconsistent with each other.
Thank you for that question, presiding member. So I guess firstly, the acoustic assessment that was carried out determined that an acoustic fence was only required along the southwestern boundary that directly adjoins some residential properties. The main noise source which would affect those properties is the use of car parking spaces, and that warranted a 1.8 metre high fence of minimum 8 kilos per square metre surface density. So things like double skin colour bond would achieve that requirement. So that's what our proposal was for at the outset when we lodged the application, because that's what the acoustic assessment demonstrated would require compliance to achieve. So in terms of condition 6, we understand that this is a scheme requirements. We're satisfied that we can provide that fencing. It requires masonry or similar materials, so there's similar brickwork and limestone blockwork aren't the only methods to achieve it. I guess I'd say at this point, we'd prefer for that condition, not to be there, but we're not contesting it today because the acoustic report demonstrates that compliance can be achieved with a different kind of fencing standard. I guess the one thing that I'd raise is along the southeastern boundary of the site, it doesn't actually directly adjoin residential properties, it adjoins a drainage reserve. Hence the reason why the acoustic report didn't demonstrate that any acoustic fencing was required along that boundary. So if there were going to be any questions toward the city staff, perhaps any opportunity for the fencing to be limited to the southwestern boundary, maybe something to consider, but we're not looking to contest unless some further discussion occurs in the meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions from panel members to the applicant?
I do have one question,
Yes.
Madam Presiding Member. Just to be clear, so condition 6 with regards to the masonry fence at 2 metres minimum, is that the requirement? Like that is actually what we're asking for?
That's what the condition includes. Correct. I will have some questions to the officers. Yes, that's what the condition
Me too.
currently
Thank
says.
you. Just want to get that clarified, but yes, I'll be asking some questions.
If there are no further questions, thank you for your presentation. We will move to city officers. City officers, would you like to provide comment on this proposal, and then we can go to questions?
Yeah, sure. I guess in respect to condition 6, it's a town planning scheme requirement where we've got commercial development interfacing with residential development that a 2 metre high masonry wall be provided. Notwithstanding what came out of the acoustic assessment, obviously, which stipulates a minimum 1.8, but also sets, as Alessandro said, sets a minimum density of 8 kilos per square metre. Really, the scheme's concerned about amenity impacts between commercial and residential development, hence the requirement for a 2 metre high masonry or similar material wall. That wall in itself, or whatever it ultimately ends up being, would need to make the requirements of the acoustic assessment. If that can be achieved with a colour bond fence, I'd hazard a guess that a masonry or similar type wall, a modular wall, would hit that acoustic requirement as well. So the scheme's concerned with, obviously, noise is one, but then visual amenity as a secondary issue as well.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
No, we support the application. We think it's going to be a good development for the area, and it will certainly clean up that corner of what is presently a pretty well underutilised commercial lot. So we're happy to support it, but obviously wanted to increase, I guess, the amenity and interface between the residential development and this site in accordance with the scheme, hence the condition 6.
Thank you. Panel members, do you have any questions to city officers?
I do, presiding
Yes.
member. Brendan, the properties to the west, the existing commercial properties, are there rear boundary fences, masonry or similar?
They are not, and the reason for that is that they were built in the 70s when that scheme requirement wasn't there.
Thank you.
If we get any redevelopment on those sites, obviously we'd be looking to apply a similar condition.
Okay, thanks very much, Brendan.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from panel members?
Yes, Madam Presiding Member, I do have a couple of questions.
Yes.
With regards to the masonry fence, which I'm supportive of and being 2 metres, can the officers please comfort me, if you like, in terms of the fact of when it is a gymnasium, and I'm mindful of when weights are dropped and hit the floor, the reverberations, so the weights themselves, as well as if there's any, if you like, I'll use the expression, doof music playing at 2 a.m, since it is a 24-hour gym. I'm confident from what I've read. I just want the officers to make sure that there'll be a good soundproofing is what I'm looking for, the ability to not hear that type of music, because it is a gym and often they'll play music in addition to the weights hitting the floor, and I've had other experience. So can you please give me some comfort on that, please?
Yeah, so that's covered through the acoustic assessment, David, that all of the noise levels that have been assessed for the development are compliant with the assigned noise levels at all times.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that answer, Mr. Scambler. My other question is actually just to do with the parking issues, which have been discussed in detail in the report, and I understand the shared parking arrangements. You're confident that that will be not an issue? It appears to be not an issue, but sometimes with parking in gymnasiums and the crossover, particularly between, say, 4:30 to 5:30 in the evening when people go home from the businesses next door, but should be adequate parking?
That's right. Yeah, we've assessed it. We're comfortable with what's being provided and the arrangements for shared parking. Obviously, like I said, with these things, it's just going to have to be a case of monitor it. And if parking does become a problem, we'll need to discuss that with the landowner at that point. But we're confident with the traffic impact assessment that's been provided. We're comfortable with the amount of parking that's being provided and accounted for.
Thank you, Mr. Scambler. No more questions, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you. Any further questions to officers? I have a couple of questions. My question is similar to the applicant. Condition 6 requires a 2.0 metre high wall. The condition 11 refers to the acoustic report prepared by Lloyd George Acoustics, reference number in there. One of the things that it talks about is, and it says compliance with the recommendations. My question is about the difference between the two. The recommendations in attachment 3 of the acoustic report require a 1.8 metre high double skin colour bond fencing. So this condition would require, in my read of it, a 1.8 fencing double skin colour bond fencing as per the recommendations. Yet condition 6 says a 2 metre high wall. Would you be expecting either? So that's the first part of my question. And the second part is that the acoustic report indicates that this proposal meets noise amenities by the wall, but also by the roof and ceiling system in the gym, as well as glazing being a minimum thickness. So I suppose my question is, what is it that the city ultimately wants in terms of the fencing, and what any sort of supporting further comments you want? Because the report indicates you're comfortable generally with the proposal. So I just want clarity, because, as I say, condition 6 and condition 11, one of them needs some sort of changes to marry up.
Yeah.
Or not, depending on what your comments are.
Yeah. So under the recommendations of part 5 of the acoustic report, it talks about a 1.8 metre high double skin colour bond or other fencing material, meeting a minimum 8 kilo per square metre surface mass.
Yep.
So what would need to be demonstrated through any other alternative wall that isn't obviously a double skin colour bond would be that it meets the minimum 8 kilos square metre surface mass, of which a masonry or modular type wall would meet. and therefore it would meet the compliance with that recommendation of the acoustic report. The height difference, the higher the wall or fence, the more acoustic barrier it's going to provide. So the difference between 1.8 and 2 metres, obviously the scheme requires 2 metres. The acoustic report requires 1.8 as a minimum. I don't think, and I don't believe that there needs to be any alterations to the acoustic report or the conditions as they stand, because compliance can still be achieved, because the way that the recommendation is written in the acoustic report is either 1.8 high double skin colour bond or other fencing material, as long as it meets the 8 kilos per square metre.
Correct. I would agree with you on condition 11. That's exactly how it reads. And attachment 3, recommendations. Condition 6 talks about a masonry fence or similar material to a construction of 2 metres. So my question is that there are some differences in the height. The acoustic report doesn't specifically require at the same height, and it might be a minor issue, but it does give discrepancy. So are you saying that you feel that they both can coexist if they are both talking
because
about
the acoustic assessment is a minimum height that it needs to achieve.
Yep. Thank you. My second question is in relation to another set of conditions. Those are conditions 12 and conditions 13. They are, my recollection is that they are relative to main roads. Now, typically a condition has a time frame and or a clearing agent. And I see that neither of these have a clearing agent. So typically they would say for condition 12 that all signage on the site to comply with the following, A, B and C, to the satisfaction of City of Gosnells on advice from Main Roads WA. Do you have any comment about or some further commentary on that condition, as well as condition 13, which also makes a statement, but it doesn't give a time frame or a clearing responsibility, agency responsibility?
Yeah, usually we would have a reference to the clearing authority or basically to the satisfaction of the city. I think the conditions are pretty absolute in that that's what they need to do. I'm happy if you'd like to add to the satisfaction of the city on both of those conditions. Ultimately, we are the clearing authority on that. I don't have a problem with that. In terms of a time frame, the stormwater discharge, obviously, we will look at that as part of our assessment of the drainage plans. But obviously, it's a main roads condition. And whilst we didn't disagree with it, obviously we've included it. Otherwise, it would have needed to have become a dual approval if we didn't think it was necessary. Ultimately, through the drainage plan conditions, we'll ensure that there's no stormwater discharge coming off the site. However, it's a requirement of Main Roads that was a recommendation of Main Roads that be a condition. So
would you be comfortable with that condition 13 that you're referring to include prior to, is it building permit that you would suggest rather than occupancy, to the satisfaction, and then include at the bottom to the satisfaction?
Yes, I think it would be ongoing, that condition. Because obviously we can sign off on a building permit, we can sign off on designs, but if those designs fail and then you have stormwater discharge, then what? Because if you're saying prior to occupation or prior to development or prior to a building permit, you shouldn't discharge stormwater. What happens if that fails?
Yep. So we typically would have the time frame for you to make your determination of the design, and then thereafter it needs to be implemented and maintained to the satisfaction of the city. That would be typically the wording we would use.
Yeah. So condition 4 is prior to applying for a building permit, the applicant shall submit, have approved and thereafter implement a drainage plan to the satisfaction of the city. And so as part of that, we would be assessing that the drainage is suitable. Obviously, then if stormwater does start to discharge into the main roads reserve, we would need to have a look at that at that point. I mean, it may be that you could amend condition 4 to include a point that at no point should stormwater discharge into Albany Highway or Kenwick Link road reserves, or alternatively, because it's an ongoing condition.
Thank you.
That's how we kind of, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I will actually ask a comment from the applicant. I see you have something you want to add. It was unusual, but I will take it. Is it specifically related to this matter?
Yeah, I just thought I'd offer a solution that may actually resolve the concern. So if we add the wording to condition 13 at the end to say for the life of the development, I think that should resolve the potential ongoing concern that Brenton's raising. Because I believe condition 4 requiring a drainage plan should obviously demonstrate that drainage will be managed in a way that would comply with condition 13. But as Mr. Scamble was pointing out, condition 13 is, the way I read it, it's meant to be an advisory form of condition to state that stormwater shouldn't be discharged into any of the external road reserves for the life of the development. So perhaps if we add that wording to that condition, it would resolve the situation.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from members? If there are no further questions, we will now move to the motion. The motion is at the beginning of the responsible authority report. Is there a mover of the recommendation as written?
I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for the motion? It is seconded. Okay, we will move to the mover. Councillor David Good, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I think it's a good development, a good proposal. My concerns about parking, sound and even music have been allayed, and I think it's architecturally, it looks sound and it meets all planning guidelines. I'm happy to move this motion.
Second, like to speak to the motion. No? Any other speakers on the motion?
Yes, I will. I support the proposed development. It's consistent with the planning framework, the zoning, the permissible use, traffic and access, noise, fencing, setbacks have all been addressed and conditions appropriately framed. In regard to the acoustic fence, I think the 1.8 metre as a minimum in the acoustic report is covered, and the 2 metre high masonry or similar is appropriate for the town planning scheme requirements. Parking, I don't have an issue with the reciprocal parking rights and different hours of operation. The adjoining commercial developments in the gym are covered, so I support the proposal. In regard to condition 13, I think that could be covered as an advice note because that's a fairly standard requirement from main roads, but I think I'll leave it if anyone else has a different view, but because presiding member, you did say that you were probably foreshadowing an amendment on that, but my view is that it could be an advice note.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the motion? Yes.
Thank you, presiding member. I'll also be supporting the motion. As has already been mentioned, from a planning framework, I think the proposal is consistent. It's also consistent with the local centre objectives under the scheme. It's sort of an odd location, and I think this form of semi-commercial activity fits in well, even though noting there's been a couple of objections to the proposal. But having said that, I believe that amenity issues around noise are addressed satisfactorily through the acoustic report. In terms of potential inconsistency between condition 6 and 11, I think the inconsistency is relatively minor, and I'm comfortable that between the applicant and the city officers that matter can be addressed so that there is appropriate compliance consistent with the acoustic reports. On that basis, I'm prepared to support the application.
Thank you. I will speak to the motion. I would also agree that the development is a good development in this location. The design, I think, is an exceptional design actually for a facility of a gym. I think the facade presents well to the road. The internal facade facing the car park also presents well. And I note that the rear of the property has windows, although they include thick glass to protect from noise, but in terms of overlooking impact on other impacts on amenity, the report has addressed that, and I'm satisfied with the office assessment has been fully considered in relation to that matter. With relation to some of the variations in relation to parking, like others, I agree that the on-site parking and the reciprocal parking is appropriate. I'm also satisfied that whilst the minor variation on signage in relation to it being a number of signs on there, I think it's appropriate in the context of the design and its location. I don't see any impact from the particularly facing the road. In terms of impact on the residential amenity, I would agree that there have been some concerns raised. However, I'm satisfied that the information contained in the report has thoroughly addressed those and reviewed those, and that the design of this building creates a separation, an appropriate design and features to separate it from noise, noting that this general location has substantial ambient noise given its proximity to those significant roads that are operational. I will at this juncture move an amendment. My amendment is for the minutes taker, Amendment 1, and assume I get a seconder. It is Amendment 1, it relates to condition 12. The words are to add all signage on the site to comply with the following, and then there is A, B and C. And then the following words, the modification is to include to the satisfaction of the City of Gosnells on advice from MRWA. If there is a seconder, that is.
Happy to second it.
Thank you. It is seconded. I will speak to the item. My reasons for the changes, I agree with the wording of the condition generally. Just to clarify, the compliance is assisted by, and the clearing agent will be the. That's my comments. Would you like to speak to it?
Very briefly, I agree. It provides clarity in terms of the satisfaction of the condition.
Is anybody else wish to speak to this Amendment 1?
No.
I have nothing further to say, and I'll put Amendment 1 to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously for the minute taker. I have an Amendment 2. It is condition 13, and it would be using some of the language that the applicant has indicated at the end of it, from stormwater shall not be discharged into Albany Highway and Kenwick Link Road Reserve or widened road reserve for the life of the development, to the satisfaction of the City of Gosnells on advice from Main Roads. Again, it is just to provide clarity and certainty on the condition. If there is a seconder.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. I don't have much more to say. As I've already indicated, it's for clarity and certainty. Would you like to speak further?
No comment.
Any members, would you like to speak to the motion? If not, we'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Are there any other speakers? I think we will now move back to the mover, Councillor David Good, for right of reply and close of debate.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I have no further to add other than it's a good development. I support it.
Thank you. We are going to the vote on the substantive motion, including those amendments. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously. There are no Form 2 applications in relation to City of Gosnells on today's meeting, and there are no SAT reconsiderations for this part of the agenda. With that, I would like to thank both our members from the City of Gosnells, Councillor David Good and Councillor Karen Baines. Thank you very much. And at this point, we will close this portion of the meeting and move to Part C. For the minute taker is 10:04 a.m. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
See you later.
Bye now.
Thank you. Yeah, we are now moving to Part C, City of Rockingham, of the agenda, 10:05, and we will commence this part. I'd like to welcome our two new members, Councillor Dawn Jex, welcome to today's meeting, and Councillor Mark Jones online. Welcome, Councillor Mark Jones.
Thank you, Presiding Member. You hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
We have a full complement of today's panel members for today's meeting. I would like to now ask that panel members have duly considered all documentation contained in Part C of the agenda and Part C related information. We have a show of hands. That is unanimous for the minute taker. We will now move to disclosures of interest. There are a number of interests that have already been disclosed. They are from Councillor Dawn Jex. It's an impartiality interest, previous participation in council meeting, and that has already been considered by the DAP Executive Director for you to participate fully in today's meeting. We also have Councillor Mark Jones, who's given an impartial interest, who previously participated in a council meeting, which this item was heard. This has also been considered by the DAP Executive Director, and approval has been granted to sit and fully participate on this meeting. For both of the members, Councillor Dawn Jex and Councillor Mark Jones, do you have any other interests to declare? Thank you. We have a third interest, and that is member Tony Arias. It is the impartial interest. His interest is that he has previously provided services, utilised services of David Hawley, who has the Director of Blue Rock for a project in the City of Busselton. This interest has been considered in full by myself as the presiding member, and approval has been granted to fully participate in this meeting and make determination on the proposal. Members, are there any other interest disclosures in relation to this? Do you wish to make any further comment on your interest? Thank you. There are no further interest disclosures for the minute taker. We will now move to our first item. It is item 3.1, number 7 to 19 McNichol Street, Rockingham, proposed 33 group dwellings. We do have one presentation, Declan Creelan. I'm not saying that correct. Can you pronounce it for me? Creegan. Thank you. Declan, we're going to hand over to you for your presentation. As you are aware, in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 4.8.2, you have a 3-minute time frame, so I'm going to hand over to you to give your presentation before we go to questions. After questions, we will go to city officers, which I understand are both online. We have listed here David Banovic and Lindsay Bergsman. Is that? I beg your pardon, you're both in the room. Thank you. Would you like to present?
Well, good morning, panel members. My name is Declan Creighton. I'm a town councillor of Urbis, and Urbis is representing the proposed 33 group dwellings development application in Rockingham. I'd like to reiterate that we're really pleased with the responsible authority recommendation, and we look forward to a positive determination today. I'll briefly address the overall merit of the proposal and speak to some of the conditions. And I have with me the developer and Rothy Lohman Architects, who can assist with any development and design specific queries. So the site that this proposal is located on has been vacant for well over 10 years. It's a challenging site, that's why it's sat vacant for a long period of time. The developer has been working through these challenges and has arrived at a proposal that put forward a really high quality housing. Delivering housing remains really challenging in the WA construction market, but the developer has a great track record for residential and commercial developments in Perth, and this proposal is another great example that they're eager to get on with. What you have in front of you is a really high quality, well-designed group dwelling development that will deliver 33 new homes in the Rockingham town centre. From a planning perspective, the proposal is largely compliant with the planning framework, and we've worked closely with the City of Rockingham officers. Overall, the process has been really smooth, and the positive recommendation speaks to the merit of the proposal. In relation to the conditions, firstly, after completing the initial RAR, the City noted an access easement condition was intended to be part of the recommendation. If it had been included initially, we would not have objected to it, and the City has asked us to include it in our request today. I must admit this is the first time I've requested a new condition as part of a deputation, but working in good faith and recognising the condition's merits, we've requested the access easement be included as condition 20. The suggested wording was in our memo, and I'm happy to discuss this if necessary. And secondly, as we outlined in our memo, we're happy with the responsible authority recommendation wording for condition 11, and we're seeking that DAP maintain the wording as is. Importantly, the new wording of condition 11 does not mandate the London plane trees and verge, and we believe that the London plane trees are not the best option, as we've detailed in the Council recently discussed this at length, and we're supportive of the amended RAR wording for condition 11 and requests no further changes. To summarise and conclude, we're really pleased with the RAR recommendation. Council were really pleased that this site is finally being activated with a great proposal, and the developer is ready to hit the ground running. We hope you can make a positive determination, bearing in mind our condition suggestions. Happy to take any queries if there are any.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions to this presenter? Yes, we are moving to member Mark Jones.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for the application and the presentation. So you did present at council and we had a good discussion and debate about the trees. I had two questions. So one just regarding the overall density, like you mentioned that you are looking at develop the adjoining side. I was just wondering how that's going, and maybe explain to the other panel members why the proposed density is sort of under than that it could be for the current site. So why did you go for the current density? And then the second question would be about just the choice of the peppermint tree rather than a deciduous tree. Thank you.
Sure. So in relation to the chosen density, this application specifically related to 33 group dwelling townhouses. I note that the development area comprises a broader development site. And on the broader development site, we've recently lodged a new development application for apartments. That's subject to a different assessment process and is a separate application. But I suppose we wanted to offer diversity on the site. There's a range of efficiencies that can be delivered with these. And it's also about, I suppose, difference in what the ultimate client and demand will be. So two separate applications, but very much so looking to deliver a diversity in products and options within the town centre. And in relation to the trees, so the advice from the landscape architect was to go for a native tree, a water-wise tree, and hence why we've put forward the WA peppermint trees. In relation to why we chose that over, say, a London plane tree, from a maintenance perspective and an ongoing infrastructure consideration, certainly there's a lot of instances where the London plane trees can be quite damaging and destructive to infrastructure when they're establishing and once they're established. They're also not native, they're not water-wise, they take a lot of water. There's a lot of effort to get them established and basically just ongoing there's constant maintenance considerations. The WA peppermint trees, they're water-wise, they're drought tolerant, they have minimal infrastructure impacts, and overall, we've taken the advice of the landscape architect that this is a better option for this site.
Thank you, presiding member. It was just a bit of background for the other panel members, but thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from panel members?
Yes, a
Tony,
clarification. Photo 10 in the RAR, which is on page 20, shows the site and then delineates an area green, which is, I think, which is part of registered as a contaminated site. Is that correct?
Yes, so there is some contamination on the site, some historical contamination, hence why it's been challenging to develop the site. Basically, the contamination has been managed. There's contamination reports and investigations that have been undertaken for years previous.
So just presiding member, follow-up question. So is it all part of the same ownership structure, the contaminated site and the current development?
Yeah, it's all one lot.
Yeah. So development WA, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's the land that the councillor suggested there's a further development to proceed.
Correct. So we've recently lodged a new development application over that land where the green portions are identified. So that's going through its own separate process. But yes, a new application for that portion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from panel members? If there are no questions from panel members, we will move to city officers. Thank you for your presentation. The city officer would like to come forward. Welcome to today's meeting. I'll hand over to yourselves. I've got just two people listed here, David Banovic and Lindsay Bergsman, and the third is
Mike Ross.
Would you like to speak to the item and or any comments on anything you've heard so far?
Happy to speak to the item. Any questions if necessary. We've generally had a very constructive and positive approach in terms of dealing with this development application. We also convened at the design review panel meeting. As part of that, the current development application has been revised to address some of the comments that were raised by the panel members. Similarly, the future development that's been lodged for the apartments will be considered in that context as well, whether it requires further review. But we're strictly focusing on this development application at the moment. Generally, the application is consistent with the framework in place, which is the strategic centre zone and the applicable policies we provide for that area through the precinct structure plan for Rockingham Strategic Centre, which is soon to be determined by WAPC following modifications to the precinct structure plan that the city is undertaking. The development is consistent with the density for group dwellings. So whilst there is an ability to develop apartments on that site, group dwellings can be considered as well. Group dwellings meet the minimum average of lot sizes for this development area, and group dwellings are discretionary land use. So we're generally satisfied that the build form requirements and layout of the site meets the intent of the future of the proposed framework for the strategic centre. We recognise that housing is very important and sensitive in terms of delivery in the area, and we've worked diligently with the applicant to get a favourable outcome. There is the issue of the, I guess, the veg trees in terms of the preferred species, and I'm happy to talk to that now or respond in future if there are questions that are specifically addressed in terms of that comment.
If you would like to speak to it now, yes.
Yeah, so So ultimately, the only, I guess, point of difference in terms of this development application is the choice of the appropriate tree within the verge fronting Marketplace and Louise Street. For the city, I guess we're guided by a few different things as outlined officer recommendation. Predominantly, there is a streetscape study that was prepared in 1994 by the Rockingham Strategic Centre, which was we went through the council process. It was an adopted council study, which has basically defined the preferred trees throughout the strategic centre. And that proximity, generally the London plane trees and the cutleaf plane trees. They're the type of trees that the city has been advocating for within Crown reserves and Crown land. We're not so much concerned about the landscaping treatments within the development site. We haven't challenged that. We acknowledge that within the development site, there could be root invasion issues as well, regardless of the tree species. But I guess we're focused on the veg trees. Our argument in terms of why, and we're actually talking about a cut leaf plane tree because we've accepted a bit of a compromise rather than a London plane tree. But effectively, both trees are preferred in an urban environment given their structure, which has a vertical straight structure, and it provides it's a deciduous tree which provides shade during summer, but then winter, when it's winter, the trees the leaves drop and then it provides sunlight penetration. It also, because its tree trunk being narrower than what a WA peppermint trees, it just works better in a narrow, condensed urban environment. We agree that London plane trees and the cutleaf plane trees are not as native, but they are the tree that's been, I guess, that's defined the Rockingham Strategic Centre. Until the future public realm plan is adopted, the position is, in terms of veg development, that is the preferred veg tree. The WA plane tree is also, I guess, more of an appropriate type of a tree within a suburban or a public open space context. So we just think, given that it's a Crown asset or a Crown reserve, that the city should really dictate what type of tree will be, I guess, planted there and will be maintained. There are existing existing London plane trees adjacent to this development site on the same street, and also street which is off that street, which is called Marketplace. So there is a consistent thing throughout the close proximity of the border area in terms of the tree that the city is pursuing.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions to city officers on this item? Yes.
Clarification, McNichol Street, how wide is the street?
Oh,
Just roughly, is it 25 or 30 metre road?
I wouldn't say it's more than 30, possibly even.
It might be 25.
Yeah.
And obviously the applicant's concerned about plane trees rather than perhaps peppermint is potential impact on infrastructure. Can you clarify what infrastructure is actually within McNichol Street that might be impacted?
Well, I don't know what's underground, but I guess in terms of infrastructure within the road reserve, you're going to have paving, you're going to have car parking bays. But then again, as we've mentioned in our report, all trees are able to cause infrastructure issues depending on their root. So I don't know what's underground. I mean, want to step down a dive before you dig, I wouldn't really know.
But the presiding, the photos in the RA indicate existing plane trees on McNichol Street.
That's correct, yes.
So existing, have there been issues with those trees?
No, and those trees have been planted more recently, probably the time of the development that's behind it. And that development was approved between 2013 to 2015, roughly. So the trees are about 10 years old. And we've had no issues in terms of, I guess, any damage to the veg infrastructure there.
Final question in relation to trees is obviously looking at the photos through the city centre, is that the predominant tree species?
The London plane tree is the defining predominant tree within the broader strategic centre. The cutleaf plane tree is another prominent tree within that area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from panel members on this item?
Yes, presiding member, just to David again. I I mean, what you're really saying, David, is that you're going to require plane trees anyway, because the condition says to the satisfaction of the city, and you'll be the determinant of the city requirement. Is that correct?
Unless the condition is amended, I suppose, given that noting it's a city asset, the verge, the city can at any time come and potentially put new trees in or rip out the ones that they don't like. But we are guided based on the streetscape study at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a question in relation to the future development of the site. The report refers to the future development of the site. In fact, one of the conditions, condition 18, talks about fencing. Particularly, it says the proposed 1.8 metre permeable fencing along the boundary, so to be deleted, because there needs to be a coordinated plan for the balance of the land. We're not subject to, we don't have any information on the development form. So can you speak a little bit further about the concerns? Because the design is unusual in that the plans we have shows rear access to parking from the laneway, and on the site, the interface between the rest of the site, essentially it's a pedestrian walkway which is the main entry to the building. So I'm interested about this concern because we don't have any material on what's happening on the other side. And I'm also interested in the context of SEPTED. This is an unusual treatment for entry with all of the access off the rear lane, and it doesn't seem to face a street or other. Can you speak to the design of it and why you support that? I appreciate you have probably some other information.
Sure.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, if I could just respond initially to that. From the city's viewpoint, we are initially guided by what's called a local development plan for the Goddard precinct, which includes this land. So the development application before you represents a variation to that plan, which is figure 9 on our report, where it showed that there would be a street network. So we're not going to get a public street network with this proposal, short of a public access easement for refuse vehicle access. When we were looking at this development, we were questioning what the SEPTED principles would be in relation to how that pedestrian access would work along the fence line. Because we didn't actually know, there were some preliminary plans put to the city, but nothing finalised at that stage in terms of a development application for the balance portion. So initially our view was that there would be perhaps a public street network where there would be proper SEPTED principles applied with an access path with a street frontage. But so for us, having a fence considered as part of this application without knowing what the balance portion of the site was going to be developed for was seen to be a little bit premature. So our thoughts were that the fence should be removed from this development application. And more recently, we've just received the actual development application for the balance portion of the site, which David can talk to.
So just to clarify on that, given that it's still one land holding and 2 development sites, and the intent is not to subdivide the land, we felt that this issue is unresolved at this stage, and it can be dealt with the now received development application next door. And for that process, we can work to an outcome where the city is comfortable that it's being proposed as part of this DA for the interface, because there is an integrated development guide plan, which is a statutory provision, and this integrated development plan was approved under the town planning scheme in 2012. But whilst
talking about attachment 4.
Yes, so that is it's an integrated development plan, which is effectively now a local development plan. But at the time, local development plans did not exist, and the integrated development guide plans form part of scheme provisions. So whilst we are not going to get a internal road for our network, we're still keen to explore opportunities for some kind of interconnection between the 2 sites.
And in terms of the SEPTED,
Yes, so in terms of the SEPTED, so I do note that this development has frontage to Mechanical Street for the 15 apartments facing Mechanical Street. So you're talking about the back row, which is the 18 apartments at the back.
yes, I am.
Yeah. So initially, this application, in terms of its lot configuration, was presented to the design review panel, and nothing's changed in that regard. And the design review panel experts who work, two urban designers and a landscape architect, didn't really raise that as an issue. They had more concerns about providing a broader connection between the two sites. The applicants deliver that by providing two means of pedestrian footpaths that connect to, yes, that strip of land that connects along the common boundary. We acknowledge that legibility might be problematic, but given that on-street car parking is provided on site and not, sorry, on street and not on site, we're comfortable that people that park on street can then walk around the footpaths along Kimber Place and Marketplace and then go down the, I guess, the pedestrian access way. There is also a condition of development approval that requires lighting to address, I guess, any areas of concealment or entrapment. So we're comfortable that whilst it's not your traditionally front-loaded lots for that part, we're still comfortable that it achieves the general principles of SEPTED.
Thank you. My next question relates to another condition. It's to do with the garages. And can you speak to the plan and garage changes? And it's interesting because the plans that we have in front of us appear to include one parking bay with, they've got it titled something else on there. What does it say on the plan? It references a multi-purpose, the adjoining space, but it appears to be on those same buildings that face the pedestrian link at the rear there. They indicate that they have a double carport or double garage. Can you speak to this concern about?
I'll pass that on to Lindsay, who.
Yeah, so initially the application spoke to having single, at least one car parking space per unit. The traffic study associated with that actually suggested that the garages were sufficient for 2 car parking bays. We questioned it at the time, and the applicant came back and confirmed that that was an error in the traffic study. So that was amended, and the units have all been approved with a single bay. The additional parking is, or parking or storage is for any incidental storage, or so they're not a double car parking garage.
So the concern you have about the garage supports in terms of modifying it to be compliant as per the condition, you're satisfied that this design can do it within the frame of the design we have in front of us and not a substantial alteration.
Correct. The applicant has confirmed that they can remove that post, and so the manoeuvrability in and out will not be an issue. So
when you say remove that post, what are you referring to?
Initially there was, I'm not sure if it's shown on the plans.
So I'm looking at plan reference number. It's electronic page 36, and it is DA 0106P2 ground floor plan. It's the rear ones. It's probably the one I'm looking at the moment. It's got the carports and multi-purpose. Then there's the roof, which staggers over the top, and then there's a pole partway down the carport.
Correct. I don't have it in front of me, but there was a post there which was supporting the roof above. That was causing an issue from our traffic.
Okay, so it's the internal pole.
Internal pole.
Causing, not the. Okay, I have misunderstood that.
So we questioned that at the time to say, look, that's it's not complying with Australian standards. That the applicant came back and said we can get that removed and support the structure another way. That's been fine.
Thank you. I have another question. Relates to condition 4. Condition 4 is a definitive condition saying that it must operate in accordance with the waste management plan. Would you have any concerns if it said or as amended to the satisfaction? So include the words as amended, because it would be quite rigid. That would be no opportunity for any changes throughout.
Yeah,
You don't have any concerns with that. I have a condition 9. Condition 9 in terms of off-street parking. So you need that material. You want the design prior to the building permit being implemented and made applying for, and then implemented and maintained after. That's fine. I'm assuming it's to your satisfaction. So you wouldn't have any concerns with adding the words to the satisfaction of the City of Rockingham on it.
Objection.
And then condition 10 refers to on-street parking. And it refers to requiring the design prior to a building permit and constructed prior to occupation. Can you speak why you require that design for on-street prior to building permit? Is that something that you need it, or is it something that would require prior to occupancy? I'm just interested about the timing for it.
Well, it's prior to occupancy would be too late to approve the detailed design drawings, because by then we'd expect on-street car parking to be delivered on site, to be readily available.
For occupancy.
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any concerns with added words at the that these are to the status and being maintained? It says thereafter being. Oh no, that's fine. I don't have. That's it. They're my only questions, I think, at this juncture. Thank you for that. Any further questions from panel members?
Not for me.
Yes, Mark Jones, if you've got a question.
Yeah, presiding member, thank you. Just question, condition 10. So the applicant has to provide the bays, but then after the city maintains them, is that correct? So it's no requirement. That's the general premises. They construct the bays, and then after that, the city will then maintain them. Is that correct?
According to this condition, that is what it says: constructed, sealed, curbed and drained. There's no provision in this condition for it to be maintained thereafter, but I'll get the officers to clarify. We're talking about condition 10 on street.
It will be hand over to the city to maintain.
Yeah, thank you. That's
By not just visitors to that development, but the broader public.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Mark Jones?
Yes, yeah, it was just making sure it's just basically the applicant builds it and the city then would get it hand over and maintain. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from panel members? If not, we move to the item. Is there a mover of the item at the beginning of the RA? It is moved, member Mark Jones. Is there a seconder for the item, for the recommendation? It is seconded, Dawn Jex. Is that correct? Yes. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Just to briefly say, yeah, it's good to hear that the applicant and city staff have worked well to get to this point, and you know there's progress and it hopefully be achievable to deliver the 33 group dwellings. Yeah, initially, I was a little bit underwhelmed with the density, but knowing that another application's been lodged for some multiple dwellings at a high density, I think it'll provide a good mixture of dwelling type and accommodation, which is truly needed. So I'm a little bit, again, landscaping on the verge. I'd probably prefer some deciduous tree, but if another presiding member wants to move an alternative later, I'll certainly consider that. But generally, the whole development works well and will be well received. So I support the RAR. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Look, this is a good development with a robust process. It's in keeping with our structure plan. But I did want to speak to the reason why initially the officers put in a condition saying that the proponent has to use London plane trees, and because they are in keeping with what the local policy is for the plans for the area. And this was a 1994 streetscape study, 30 years old. Now, I know this area very well, And of course, yes, we do have plane trees close by because that's part of the streetscape plan. However, there's the other end of the street and it merges into, there's lots of gums around as well. So we're not talking about an area where it's all you can really see is plane trees. If you just turn around, you'll see gum trees there, and there's a lot of parkland around here, what I'd call parkland. There's the Autumn Centre across the road, and also further down that street, there's single-storey dwellings. There's a lot of trees, and so it's not going to look like if we have peppermint trees, situations where you got the plane trees, and then all of a sudden you've got these different trees. It's actually on the edges of that section around Goddard Precinct where we started off with mandating London plane trees. And of course, I've got a property. I mean, obviously live in the city of Rockingham as a councillor, and I've got on my property, I'm in an old area of Safety Bay where I've got a peppermint tree on my verge. So, and it's been there a long time. My house was born in the 70s. So I've virtually got a 40-year-old peppermint tree on my property. I also had a plane tree when I first moved in, which was an absolute nightmare. So it is true. We have got plane trees being used in this area, but they're about 10 years old. And when I compared my 40-year-old plane tree versus the peppermint tree, there's just no comparison in terms of the roots and the upheaval. So when I saw that proponents wanted us to remove the initial condition, you must use plane trees, not peppermint, I put in an alternate motion because I wanted to get that changed. And of course, it's irrelevant what council decides. It's this panel here that decides. But that got up, and that's why the removal of the condition to say that the proponents have to use plane trees has been removed. So I did quite a bit of research on plane trees, and I know there's quite a few jurisdictions that have banned them. They don't want to use them. And so on balance, I'm keen on sustainability. I'm keen about with the planning framework to look to future generations, to climate proofing and all those sorts of things. And again, I've seen the area, and for me, visually, as I see it, will merge into the surrounding areas. So in terms of having a different tree, and of course with the peppermint trees, the city maintains those, and they can be actually quite nice in terms of. And the city's happy to do that. That's part of our tree verge maintenance program, and people can just ask them to come and prune their trees. And I know I get mine done. The tree looks fabulous. And again, like I said, I've actually compared the two trees around. They're about 40 years old when my house was built, probably a bit more. And I'm able to compare them. And honestly, the plane tree was horrific in terms of the roots, the lifting up. I mean, ultimately, the city has to maintain the paving if it gets lifted. But I personally can't see, plane trees and peppermint trees. I can't see peppermint trees being any different. In fact, I think that the peppermint trees are better in terms of, from what I've physically seen. And as I said, there's a lot in this area. There's a lot of different types of trees. It's quite a treed area. And I appreciate we have local policies and plans in place because you want to have, a precinct area that's got some sort of structure and it looks good and it merges in with everything else. You can't have everything sort of varying. However, I just think that with this particular area, I think that the peppermint trees will be quite okay. They're water wise and they're nowhere near as expensive as the plane trees. We've got developers trying to, bring forward these housing developments, and it's quite a challenging situation, and having to try. This is why it's taken so long. Part of it because it's a challenging situation to actually deliver housing in this market. So this is why I support the development as it is now, with the developers being allowed to and not having as a condition that they've got to use plane trees, but in their proposal they put forward a peppermint tree. So that's pretty well all I've got to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the motion?
Yes, presiding member. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes. Look, the proposal I support. I think it's a good one. I think it's had I think somebody said a robust process through the assessment period and working the proposal up. It's been through a design review process, and it's the applicants have been prepared to make changes throughout. It complies with State Planning Policy 7, Design and Built Environment, the 10 objectives. Comply with 8 and partially comply with a couple of others, and those that they don't fully comply, the rationale behind that has been enunciated within the responsible authority report. It's well designed, fit for purpose, well suited to the site. Parking is compliant, traffic and access appears to pose no problems. The off-street parking for visitors is supported, and the applicants are preparing to implement that. In terms of the issue of trees, I support the peppermint trees. I think that they're an endemic tree. They're well suited to the locality, but more importantly, they're good for local fauna as well. Birds and native animals that generally use them, like possums and so forth. Maybe the residents don't like the possums being around, but they are good foraging and nesting trees and so forth for possums. And the local bird life. I think that that's important at a time when we're finding native vegetation being removed. It's good to see some form of native vegetation being put back. I think that to leave it without a condition making it mandatory for peppermint trees, I think we would be leaving it to, no disrespect, but to the city administration to mandate plane trees. And if we as a panel feel that way, then I think we should make that as a condition. So I would be proposing an amendment to the condition on landscaping. You could bear with me for a second.
Condition 11.
Condition 11. So I'm just going to pull that up again. And put sub point 6 in there, that the verge trees be of native peppermints. So that's my amendment to condition 11, amendment number 1. I'm moving that.
Is there a seconder or amendment 1? It is seconded. Would you like to continue speaking to it?
No, I think I've just mentioned it. I just reiterate that I think native trees are better. Just as well, I noticed the photos of the peppermint trees. They are very old peppermint trees, very large peppermint trees, and I think that if we got some photos of plane trees that are 40 years old, they would show that the girth of the trunks and the root systems also have an effect on the pavements around it. I think that's just one of those things that local authorities, if they're looking at, unless they just put shrubs in, they're always going to have problems with trees that spread the roots and become larger and become a bit of a maintenance issue. But I think that that's part of the course for councils. There are peppermint trees, I think, that aren't as the different varieties that perhaps can be looked at to suit as well.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the amendment 1?
Yeah, no, nothing further to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers to amendment 1?
Against?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, presiding member. Look, I must admit, given the work that city's put into the tree species through the city centre and the impact it's already having from just urban perspective. I acknowledge that plane trees are a native species, but deciduous trees have a lot of benefits in West Australian climate, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. And I think the presence that they create within a city centre, which is what the city has been doing since it adopted the policy in 1994, I think it was, I think has yielded significant outcomes. And if you look around particularly the civic buildings, it creates a great presence. So I do like the notion of plane trees. But in terms of the actual motion before us, I don't know that I'm keen to actually be specifying what species of vegetation should be in a landscaping plan. Historically, that's a matter left for the city's officers, which is what the conditions suggest, that it is a matter for negotiation with the city officers. So I actually prefer the condition as it reads. The intent of the council itself is that different species rather than plane trees, but I think that's a matter between the applicant and the city to resolve.
Any other speakers on Amendment 1? If I will speak to Amendment 1, I think whilst there is some merit in relation to some native trees, there is also merit in streetscape having a similar tree species throughout the area, and I would acknowledge the work that has been done by the city. That does not discount the inclusion of peppermint trees in the area and within the private domain. They can get large trees. They definitely do attract birds and other wildlife. However, I think there's a difference between trying to make a judgment of peppermint tree per se versus plane tree, rather than the aspect of this is within the street itself. That doesn't prevent the inclusion of any other types of tree species throughout the area, be it on private property or on parkland. So from my perspective, I think there is merit from a planning perspective to have a character element to the area that incorporates a consistency of tree plant type. I would also concur with comments that have been indicated about delving into the fine-grained detail of the tree species, and I'm comfortable to leave the condition as it is and have that matter resolved consistent with the city's thinking regarding the public domain street. Any other speakers for the Amendment 1? Yes,
Yeah, thanks,
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I do agree that this level of detail would normally be left to the staff, but it has been brought out, and even in our full council. So I guess I'm going to, at this stage, I think I've expressed personally I'd prefer the deciduous tree, but in this instance, I'm leaning towards the peppermint. So I do like that advice note rather than leave it open, because I think the applicant has made an effort on this, and I think it's been well discussed, and it seems like there's more benefit in the peppermint in this setting. I do agree. I think the actual public realm plan, which is due to be done in the next 12 months, it'd be nice to see what tree comes out of that, but we can't wait for that. So I'm happy to go for the peppermint in this and make that, detailed in that advice note. So thanks.
Thank you. Would the mover like a right of reply on Amendment 1?
Yes, I would. 1994 is a long time ago, and I think that maybe there was time to reflect on that. I normally don't favour specifying vegetation myself, but I think that a policy that's that old, I think we as a community have moved forward, and I think that in terms of the city centre, in built-up areas with multi-storey buildings and where there's very little shade and sunlight, deciduous trees are good. In this locality, I don't think there's any shortage of sunlight, even in winter months, so I don't see the need for deciduous trees in this sort of location. So I think that, and given the age of the policy, I think it introducing a bit of variety, I think at this stage doesn't do any harm. And I say that vegetation should be more endemic in these sorts of locations. So stick with the proposed amendment.
Thank you. We are going to the vote on Amendment 1, which is to add subclause 6 that the virgin tree species be WA peppermint tree. All those in favour? Against? Carried 3-2. Would you like to continue speaking?
No, in conclusion, I think that it's a good development, and the checks and balances in terms of the conditions that have been imposed are quite good, and I'm supporting the application.
Thank you. Any Councillor Mark Jones, did you have something you wanted to say?
Just a point of clarification. I don't think I moved the original motion with the inclusion of a condition 20 regarding the access easement. So would you prefer that I move that now as an amendment, or?
We can continue on with the meeting. It has been identified. I have got it listed as well myself, so that's fine. We can continue on with the meeting, but it has definitely been identified as a matter we do need to discuss.
Okay. So we'll add that later. Okay, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers on the motion?
Presiding member.
Yes.
Presiding member, thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. As has already been indicated, from a planning perspective, I think the proposal fits well into the planning framework. In terms of surrounding land use and development, I think also it seems, in terms of bulk and scale, it seems appropriate. So happy to support on that basis, noting that the design review panel has also supported the application. The assessment in the RAR against SPP 7, design of the builder outcome, indicates that the proposal generally meets the most of the requirements of good design. So on that basis, prepared to support the motion to approve.
Thank you. I will speak to the item. Like others, I am supportive of the proposal. I've asked a series of questions and the officers have provided a thorough explanation on those matters that I have raised. I will move an amendment 2 for the minute taker, and that is the new condition. It is the condition regarding the easement, and it is the wording as provided by the applicant in their documentation. And it is listed as condition 20, but it's the wording that's our panel members clear about the wording. It's arrangements shall be made to the satisfaction of the City of Rockingham for the creation of a public access easement in accordance with section 195 and 196 of the Land Admin Act, and the easement shall be placed on the certificate of title of the relevant lots to the benefit of the City of Rockingham to ensure lawful access for city waste collection vehicle along the private laneway. So that is what I'm moving, if there is a seconder.
Not second that.
It's seconded Jean Coltaz. I'm comfortable that is an appropriate motion and appropriate amendment, and it does address the issue of having vehicles accessing the site for servicing the lots, which is much more appropriate in this context and this design, rather than having people trying to take their individual bins out onto the public road system for collection. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Only to the extent that it's been requested and supported by council, so I think we're bound to support it as well.
Any other speakers on this amendment 2? If there are no speakers on amendment 2, I'm going to go straight to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously for the minute taker. I have amendment 3 for the minute taker. It is a modification of condition 4. It includes the words, for everybody that's listening, at the end of the word development, or as amended, to the satisfaction of the City of Rockingham. If there is a seconder for that, it is seconded. Tony Arias. My change, it's a very minor change, and it proposes to clarify that the city will be the clearing agent, but also to allow for operational considerations and minor amendments to the plan to be considered by the City of Rockingham, rather than it being a definitive non-fixed document and not a live document.
Presiding member, just a point of clarification on that one. Are you adding those words after the actual date of the plan rather than after the word development? Is that?
Yes, sorry, yes, that's correct. I should be adding them there. So it'd be dated the 4th of February 2025, apologies for the minute taker, or as amended to the satisfaction of the City of Rockingham.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is there anybody else wish to speak to Amendment 3? If there's no other speakers of Amendment 3, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. I have a further amendment. It is Amendment 4. It relates to Amendment 4 relates to condition 9, and it includes the words after the word development to the satisfaction of the City of Rockingham. Clarifying who will be making the determination on this matter and implementing it. Sorry, and controlling the subject matter. So though my proposal is that the off-street parking shall be designed, constructed, sealed, maintained, and it's to that particular standard, but it's to the satisfaction of the City of Rockingham. It's just a matter I want to clarify. Thank you. It has been seconded, Tony Arias. I have no further comments to it. Would you like to speak to the amendment?
No further comment.
Anybody else wish to speak to Amendment 4? If not, we are going directly to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously for the minute taker. Like others, I'm supportive of this proposal. It's a good development. It's good to see this activity occurring on that site. I note that there is a mix of development along the street. Having driven down that street, I know there's a lot of single level buildings down the street, and it will be an excellent development to get off the ground, particularly on such a large site in this particular location. Matters that I've raised in relation to some of the concerns have been clarified, and I think the proposal is overall for the area. Those are my comments. Would the mover like to close debate on the substantive motion?
And nothing further to add, presiding member. Thank you.
No problems. We are going to the vote on the substantive motion, inclusive of the amendments. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously for the minute taker. We will be now moving to our second item. It is 11:02 a.m. and we'll just change. As per the agenda, we now move to item 3.2, lot 850 Mandurah Road and 804. East Rockingham is proposed industrial development. It includes conservation works to Bell Cottage Ruin. We have a couple of presentations for this proposal. The first presentation we have is from Renee Canterbury from Heritage and Architecture. The second presentation is from George Hadji-Gabriel from Rowe Group. And we also have present with us officers from DPLH and officers from the city. I'm going to hand over to yourself, Renee. You can either speak first or second, up to you as a group. As you are aware, in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders Clause 4.8.2, there is a 3-minute limitation. Your presentations and material has been provided in detail to us, and members have indicated that they have duly considered all the material provided. Handing over to yourself to provide your comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Member. I'll go first.
Sure.
I represent the owner of the land, being the proponent of the proposal. My client's represented by Mr. Craig Matthews, who's here and is available to answer any questions. Also presenting today is Renee Canterbury from Hocking Heritage and Architecture, who will speak in relation to the heritage matters. The site's a large general industry zone property, being over 45 hectares in area. A significant proportion of the site has already been developed for industrial purposes. This proposal relates to the undeveloped northern portion of the site. Of relevance to the proposal is the existence of a state-registered heritage place, being the Bell Cottage. This relates to a clearly defined memorial area that is registered on title. In addition to the industrial development, the proposal also includes works to support the Bell Cottage, which are consistent with the requirements of the Heritage Council. City staff have been very helpful in working with us on the proposal. However, there are still some conditions which are highlighted in my submission that I would like to quickly run through. Condition 6, we've requested removal of one word within this condition as it's overly prescriptive. City staff have agreed with this point, and we ask that that also agrees. There is another point on condition 6 that I'll come to. Conditions 12, 13 and 14 all relate to the gas pipeline easement. I apologise I missed it in my submission, but there is also reference to approval by the pipeline operator in condition 6. Our client is required to comply with the requirements of the easement irrespective of this application, and as such we're of the view that the proposed conditions are not required. That said, we don't oppose inclusion of the conditions as advice notes. Whilst we have reached agreement with the city staff in relation to conditions 12 and 13, we're of the view that condition 14 should also take the form of an advice note. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there's a reference in condition 6 to approval by the pipeline operator that I think is unnecessary. Condition 15 requires the provision of civil engineering drawings in addition to the stormwater management plan that's already required by condition 5 and the requirement for a building permit. Given the proposal doesn't include any works that are to be handed over to the local government as an asset and no public roads, we're of the view that this condition is unnecessary, and as such we do request that it is deleted. Conditions 16, 17, 18, 19 and 21 are all conditions that relate to the Bell Cottage. As I mentioned previously, there is a memorial area around the cottage which defines a significant agreed buffer around the cottage. We request that all of these conditions are specifically stated to only apply to works that are undertaken within the memorial area, hence allowing works elsewhere on the site to proceed, as they will not impact on the heritage works. And Renee will speak to that in a bit more detail. Part I of condition 16 relates to the relocation of an existing fence around the cottage. Again, Renee will address the point with respect to the location of the fence, but more generally, we suggest that the use of a plan to define the location of the fence is preferred to describe the location of the fence in the condition. This will avoid the potential for any future doubt as to the intended location of the fence, and we have included a plan in our submissions. Again, part I of condition 18 will be addressed by Renee. And we've reached agreement with the city with respect to condition 20. So we're happy with that change as well.
Thank you. We would normally go to questions, but I might allow you to continue as a team, and then we'll go to joint questions to all of you. So handing over to yourself, Renee.
So Rockingham Heritage and Architecture has been providing heritage consultancy to the owner in relation to, in particular, Bell Cottage Ruin, which is on the site. There are two conditions that I'd like to address in a bit more detail, being condition 16 and 18. Regarding condition 16 and the fence setback, the existing garrison fence is not original and does not relate to a previous fence position. DPLH, acting for Heritage Council, determined in their advice letter to the City of Rockingham that a minimum 2 metre setback from the existing fence was acceptable. We have had follow-up correspondence with the Senior Heritage Officer at DPLH, who has confirmed from their viewpoint the fence location is for physical protection of the ruins and a 2 metre minimum is acceptable. So as George mentioned, the owner now proposes a more uniform setback, which is in the plan that we included on Friday. So for the north, east and south, a 4 metre setback from the ruined walls, which is equating to an additional 2 to 4 metres from the existing. For the west, which is the street facing elevation, 7.6 metres from the ruined walls, which is an additional 2 metres, enhancing visual curtilage from Mandurah Road to the main facade. So it's important to note that DPLH found that the proposed setback of 2 metres from the existing fence line maintained significant views from Mandurah Road, and that the proposal allowed for visual curtilage to Bell Cottage. Saying this, the final location of the fence will depend on the construction management plan. So regarding condition 18, the heritage curtilage and archaeology, the registered curtilage for Bell Cottage, which is also referred to as the memorial in some of the documents, is based on the recommendations of the 1999 conservation plan prepared by the city for the City of Rockingham by Palacis Architects, and is considered appropriate for the place. Hocking prepared a conservation management plan for the place in 2018, which included an archaeological management plan. Following this, archaeological test excavations were carried out to further test and refine the zones of archaeological potential and significance that were included in the archaeological management plan. A copy of the refined zones was included as Appendix B on Friday. We politely request that further archaeological investigations are only carried out within the memorial when works are proposed to be carried out in that area. Independent archaeologists affirm that existing archaeology is unlikely to be impacted unless the works are occurring above or directly adjacent. The 1999 Conservation Management Plan states, it is a common misconception that a site with archaeological potential should be excavated simply because it is there. This is in line with advice of several archaeologists in that unless the archaeology is going to be disturbed by the works, the archaeology should not be disturbed. Further to this, an archaeologist with experience and expertise will use the existing archaeological management plan and results of the test excavations to define their additional investigations, meaning the proposed amendments to this condition clarifies what is industry standard approach.
Thank you. Panel members, is there any questions to the applicants? Yes, we're moving to member Mark Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much for the application. And my main question concerns the balance of the lot. So, this current application is to the south of Bell Cottage, but what does the owner envisage happening around the cottage? Like, will we be looking at this again when another application comes in, or are you looking at, I guess, defining like what the cottage is a ruin? I acknowledge that, and it's been conserved, which is great. But yeah, just the whole interface and how the cottage will work in the future, perhaps. It's probably a crystal ball, perhaps, but if you can share any information, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I'll get my crystal ball out. That we have no further plans outside of the current application. The application, as it stands, is not a precursor to anything else. We envisage that it's going to be a majority yard and buildings, which we've shown on the drawings. And so at this stage, no, we have nothing further that we're proposing for the site at the northern end.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, thanks. No further questions.
Any further questions? Yes.
A question around the memorial. So obviously that historic thing. What set the memorial in terms of the current boundaries?
So when the 1999 Conservation Management Plan was carried out for the City of Rockingham, the architects involved with that would have used historic evidence. So old aerial photographs, they would have looked at old plans of the space, and they determined that that was the area which was considered significant to that place. So when some of these places get registered with Heritage Council, there is a heritage curtilage, and that was determined using all the historic evidence, and that was the area. So anywhere outside of there may be other aspects, but it's not considered part of that heritage significance.
Okay, and that was, if I could continue, presiding member, and that was the understanding of the context. So some time ago, there was a process that resulted in Heritage Council approving that curtilage memorial, and that was the area of importance.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
If I can add, if I'm allowed.
Again, yes.
And that's also registered on title, and identified on title as the extent of the memorial area.
Yeah, and sorry, the memorial's in favour of Heritage Council, is that?
The memorial and the heritage curtilage are being used interchangeably in some of these documents. And the management plan, archaeological management plan that was done was investigations in that heritage curtilage that's on the state register.
Thank you. We are going to member Jean Coltas. Do you have some questions?
Yeah, getting back to the memorial area, you mentioned that it was determined based on historical records and aerial photos. What elements determined that? Was it old gardens in the area, or were there other buildings or something or other there? That, because it's quite a big area around a cottage.
It is, and the Conservation Management Plan did put forward 3 options, and they did go with the one that is the larger of the areas. Not being part of the team that did that process, I can only talk to what I would expect the process would be, is to base it on something, some sort of physical evidence or knowledge, with probably a little bit more breadth on it as well, just to be safe.
Okay, and the George, the area that's shown on the plans is a darker grey and hatched. That's all hard stand, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So it's proposed to hard stand up to the fence line?
Correct.
Okay, and before you do the hard stand, you'll do some archaeological scratching around, I presume, where it's going to be covered by hard stand?
Correct. I believe that's the case. Okay.
So generally what will happen is, so the archaeological management plan and the test excavations have identified zones of significance. So that was that Appendix B, and where there's areas of high significance, there will be more in-depth investigations in those locations before any works. Where there are areas of low significance, that will form part of a construction management plan, and during the works, standard practice would be, if something is uncovered, then a discussion would happen with an archaeologist, and the steps outlined in the archaeological management plan would be undertaken. So there's already a document outlining the process for if finds are found on site. And
the movement to extend the boundaries to 10 metres, was that supported by DPLH or Heritage Council?
So DPLH is very comfortable, and I've had numerous follow-up conversations and emails with them, that if the construction management plan showed that 2 metres was acceptable, then they are happy that 2 metres is acceptable. we've obviously now revised and provided a more uniform approach, which provides a greater curtilage to some of the sides of the ruin to give a bit more of an even location of the fence. Yes, DPLH was happy with the 2 metres.
Okay,
That's 2
thank
metres
you.
from the fence.
Yeah, just to clarify, if I may, that's 2 metres from the existing fence.
Yes, yeah.
The request for 10 metres has come from the city.
Based on, I think, the Rockingham Historical Society or something like that. I don't have the exact wording. I think that was in one of their submissions.
Yeah. I think the Rockingham Historical Society was also happy with the 2 metres, but I'll need to check, and perhaps the guys from the city will be able to confirm that.
Yes, all right. Well, we'll probably quiz them on that then. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? I have. Keep going.
Conditions 12, 13, 14, and you did mention 6 as well, reference APT. The argument is that there's a separate approval required, and therefore what DAP does here is irrelevant in terms of that approval. My words, not yours. I must admit, in the past, DAPs have followed that process. And it's a question for the city's officers as well, what makes this different? You understand within the easement, you can't do anything without APT approval. And it may be beneficial to clarify that in footnotes, but what's your understanding?
Well, it's probably neither here nor there, because our client has to get that approval to do any works in the easement area anyway. It's just that it's not really appropriate to go in as a condition of the approval, because you're doubling up on something that's already required. And you're imposing a condition that requires approval of another agency.
Okay, but in terms of obviously the city's officers have some concerns that it's left without any notification. Your position about it being part of an advice note?
With that, no issue at all with that.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. Anyone can answer. There's been a number of comments in the report about the timing of the works associated with conditions. So, for example, prior to building permit, etc. So I suppose my question, and you've made some comments in relation to the issues of timing. Can you speak to that? That's my first question. And I've got a separate question from a heritage perspective. Anyone want to speak to that?
Well, I'll start on that if you like. As I mentioned before, it is a very large site, and there are fairly a number of sort of areas that are well outside the zone of influence of the heritage matters. Resolving some of the heritage issues will undoubtedly take some time, and there's processes to be worked through. The way the conditions are currently worded, it would mean that nothing could occur on any of the rest of the site until all of those heritage processes and matters had been dealt with. We just think that those conditions are specifically related to the heritage matters and related to the Bell Cottage, so they should be specifically related to the area within the memorial, which is the area where the heritage significance is. That shouldn't hold up works outside that memorial area, but still within the site.
So in that context, the concerns that have been raised in the RA relate to impact of construction work, particularly on the proximity of those works, the hard stand around the site, and the impact that that will have on the current condition and the absence of having further information and documentation. There is concern that there'll be damage. Do you have any comments in relation to that? I don't know whether you can answer it or whether it's a heritage response.
Probably might both answer it.
You can start.
I guess it might be helpful to look at the attachment that Renee had in her plan, which actually shows the extent of the heritage memorial area, being that yellow area. And I can't tell just by looking at it, but the distance between the edge of the memorial area and the Bell Cottage is significant. Craig might have a better sense than I do, but it could be 20 metres.
15 metres, 16
15 to 20 metres. So we basically were saying that you should be able to undertake works outside that area because it's to have something occurring 15 to 20 metres away from the Bell Cottage isn't going to impact on the cottage. Certainly anything closer than that requires a construction management plan, which needs to deal with the vibration impacts and all of those different things that are referenced by the city, and we completely agree with that and have no issue with that one whatsoever. It's just that the way the conditions are worded, they would sterilise development that is a significant distance away from the Bell Cottage as well.
So your concern is not so much about the delivery of those, for example, the construction management plan as per 17, condition 17, but it's more that it be contained within the area, which is what I'm looking at the moment, attachment D, I think it is,
yes,
to the submission, is that it's really in that area and treat those separate because of the distance between the ruins and the edge. You're saying from a heritage perspective and a structural perspective, the works are far enough away to not create a problem or further eroding of the ruins.
So definitely from the archaeological perspective, I have no concern about works happening outside that memorial impacting whatever's in the ground within the memorial area. Even the construction works outside impacting the village distance away, and where the field form is occurring as well is even further to the south as well. Saying that, obviously the owner is under the understanding that they are responsible for that heritage structure, so there will need to be monitoring during works, and if something happens, then they will need to pivot from there.
The heritage report, there's also a heritage report from the city, and we have in the room with us officers from DPLH, so we will be speaking to those later, but you're obviously up first. So my question is, we have essentially 3 experts in heritage, and I'm interested in hearing from a heritage perspective your comments in relation to the differences between yourself and the other heritage experts. So I'm trying to unpick from a non-heritage perspective why you settle on different positions. I'm going to have exactly the same question to the others to just unpick it a bit.
So I think having read Stephen Carrick's report, there's probably, when you actually look at his report against the different levels of significance, there's actually the general findings of his findings and my findings are quite similar in regards to the adverse impact of the proposed works on the heritage structure. The main difference being this 10-metre curtilage. He has the opinion that the 10 metres is required more for a visual curtilage perspective in addition to the area protection. The applicant is more of the opinion that 2 metres from the existing, which we have now increased, is sufficient from a visual curtilage, but is also a minimum if a construction management plan demonstrates that more is required, then it's more a science-based requirement. The reality is the ruins are quite far into a site that's private. The road, I think, is 70 kilometres an hour. In terms of being able to see the structure from the road, it's not somewhere where you're pulling off and having a look. It isn't really visible from all 4 sides. It's that main facade which will have that 7.6 metres from the front of the building. And we're talking about a garrison fence. It's not a solid structure, so you'll still be able to see the ruin. So I'm quite comfortable with that, and that was the findings that DPLH came to. So we actually had had several meetings with DPLH, and they came out to site and we walked around site with a couple of the officers and then provided them the opportunity to review and comment on a preliminary proposal.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions at this juncture? Members, you can come back if you wish to the presenters. There's nothing further. Thank you for your presentation. We will now move to the DPLH to come forward as well. Questions to parties. As members are probably aware, we have officers from the city with us, and we also have a representative from the DPLH. The representative is Chloe Parkinson. Is that correct, Chloe? Yep. And she will be able to speak as well to the DPLH in relation to this matter. The officers have heard what's been said so far. Would you like to make any comments on the proposal or on any response or comments in relation to what you've heard? I'll hand over to city officers before going to DPLH.
Yeah, perhaps, thank you. If I could just open the discussion from the city's viewpoint. We acknowledge the work that the proponents and George and his team have done. We certainly have welcomed this application. For us, Bell Cottage is an intrinsic part of the city's heritage. It relates back to the colonial period, where early settlers originally settled in the city of Rockingham. So this place, together with other buildings in the area, are intrinsic to the city's history. And we would absolutely welcome the application from the viewpoint of the conservation initiatives that have been put forward in discussion with department officers. So we overall believe that both the industrial development aspects and the heritage aspects can work together on the site in unison, which is really important. We have actually been doing quite a lot of work behind the scenes with another heritage consultant in relation to the possibility of designating East Rockingham as a heritage area. That work is still in progress. We have a very clear understanding about the heritage values associated with the broader precinct of East Rockingham. Some of those heritage values are certainly intrinsic in relation to the discussion on this site. The building itself, the ruin, is of primary contribution. So that is the main focus of our interest. The area around the ruin, within the actual memorial area, or the heritage curtilage, is of secondary contribution. There's been a number of reports that have been prepared over the years from the viewpoint of conservation management plans by Palassus back in the late 1990s through Landcorp and others. And we acknowledge that there's also been some work done in the past several years through the proponents going through a heritage grants program and doing a conservation management plan with an archaeological test, which was certainly beneficial in understanding some of the archaeological elements of the site. For a long time, the Rockingham District Historical Society has campaigned for the conservation of Bell Cottage, going back 30 years ago. So we've consulted with them and they've certainly welcomed the work, and they've recommended that the chimneys be conserved as well as part of the structural elements, and they've supported the general approach. I guess from the city's viewpoint, we've looked at the heritage aspects in particular, and we've consulted with Stephen Carrick, who's our heritage advisor, and I'll get Stephen to talk to the advice that he's provided. We've also consulted with the department officers and welcome your attendance. We appreciate that and the support. We've gone through quite a detailed assessment from our viewpoint after considering the department's advice in relation to the manner and form in which the heritage elements can be considered. One of the standout elements from us is that the fencing, as it currently stands, the garrison fencing is far too close to the building. In some respects, at the rear, it's within a few metres of the actual building itself, and it actually goes over the original dry store. So we we took advice from Stephen on that, and certainly from a visual viewpoint, we believe that the fencing should be broadened out. There is no science, according to Stephen, in terms of exactly how far that should go. But I think Stephen used the words of having a respectful distance and separation between the garrison fencing and the building would be preferable from the city's viewpoint. We understand that the department initially, through their discussions, had suggested, accepted a 2 metre setback. We too have also had some further discussions, and it's our understanding that the department actually supported a fencing setback that was larger if it could be accommodated, but we'll hear further on that. The other aspects of the site were to do with the construction elements, and we're aware that there will be no doubt cutting in of the weeds and no doubt removal of a certain element of the site, the surface of the site, preparing it for a sub-base for heavy vehicles. So there will certainly be, we're expecting some form of potentially excavation, a lot of earthworks, potentially material coming to the site to build up a sub-base for heavy vehicles themselves. So from a construction viewpoint, we took advice through Stephen, and Stephen's also taken advice from a structural engineer in relation to this, and I'll get him to talk to that. But one of our main concerns was the fact that you end up with both pre and post heavy vehicle construction, both construction vehicles during construction works and heavy vehicles post-construction in close proximity to what is a very fragile building. It's, I think the structural report was really useful because it just highlighted how fragile this building is. In parts, it requires substantial propping up the front walls to save it from further falling over, if that can be done, because obviously they need to do test pulls on that to see that it actually will work. But there are other elements of the building that we thought that should be conserved because they're part of the original fabric of the building. And we acknowledge that the stone barn at the rear, which is in the secondary contribution area, has gone, still forms part of the archaeology of the site, and there are some remnants of that that could be used to help do conservation works to some of the stone repairs. But we believe that the original fabric of the building is important to retain. So based on the Borough Charter principles of doing as much as you have to, but as little as possible, to remove sections of the wall, we think that could potentially be saved through further work is important, and that should be done as part of the conservation works themselves. So those are probably the main elements, but the actual concern that we've got is that there will be potential for vibration and activities close to the ruin. And for that reason, we believe that the works to the conservation of the place should be paramount when it comes to doing as soon as possible, because if they're left in situ while the other part of the development is built, we don't know how long it's going to take before that work is going to happen. And we don't know what impact that work is going to have on the actual ruin itself. At one stage, we considered engaging directly a vibration engineer that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know that there was an actual vibration engineer that exists, but they do. So we believe that there needs to be some further technical advice that guides the approach, and that is the reason why we didn't actually support changing the condition to say works within the memorial area. Because if it's just within the memorial area, the rest of the development could happen outside of it, and we don't know, and in fact, what impact that's going to have on the place, and we don't know when the conservation works are going to occur. So we're very respectful for the process that's been played out, but we do consider that there is some basis upon which we've considered the heritage conditions. But at this point, I'm just asking maybe if Stephen could add further to his advice.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. I'll address two questions. I think the fence line question, which is within the memorial. So the memorial is obviously, as you've seen, is a wider area referred to as the heritage curtilage. So the fence is within that curtilage. So the distance of 10 metres is, as Mike so eloquently put it, not scientific. It's really related to a better visual protection buffer zone and also assisting in the visual appearance, so safety and visual. The second item addressed is the fragile nature of the ruin. So that's not just in my assessment. I know one of the questions is like, what do we base these opinions on? And I think the structural report that was undertaken by the applicant referred to the fragile nature and the areas unsafe to enter currently. And I think as a state registered place and as one of the values that's within the statement of significance that actually goes with the registration, points out the archaeology of the site and the importance of that archaeology. So therefore, the protection of that fragile ruin is paramount, as Mike put it. So I think that probably best summarised. I think Mike actually covered many of my points.
Anything further the officers want to say at this point in time?
Casey?
No, just wanted to reiterate that we have, like you said previously, there's 3 heritage experts here, similar opinions, but they've all, I guess, had varied recommendations. As the assessing officer, as the city has said, we tried to work, I guess, collectively and consider all those elements to be able to, I guess, respect the heritage aspect of it, to come up with conditions and an assessment that collaborates all those types of opinions together to achieve an outcome that does respect the heritage assets, the primary and the secondary attributes of the significance of the area, to establish, I guess, a collective opinion that it is important, and to be able to understand the heritage site and its, I guess, longevity, we need to be able to be sure and have a guarantee that the development as proposed isn't going to impact on that. I guess that's where I would sum up.
Yeah. Thank you.
I might just add one more quick comment.
Yes.
Acknowledging that this is a state heritage listed property, it also has a local cultural heritage significance, and it's acknowledged for a different legislation, the Planning and Development Act, the Town Planning Scheme number 2. But specifically, with respect to the Heritage Act 2018, it does allow provisions where city can apply additional measures that are not in conflict with the advice of the Heritage Department to better improve, I guess, the outcomes associated with that heritage place. So what we're saying here is we've worked collaboratively with the proponent and DPLH, but we've sought to complement what's been initially proposed through option 2 of the works to get a better outcome in terms of, I guess, maintaining what's left of that heritage ruin. That makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we go to questions from panel members, I might just ask Chloe Parkinson from DPLH to provide comment. We have material that, excuse me, you provided and comments. Could you make some comment in relation to the heritage matters?
So I think the first thing is about the fencing, and our advice was an extra 2 metres from the existing fence. But we also, our advice to the City of Rockingham was that a larger setback would be preferred. So the 2 metres extension was essentially the absolute minimum that we could think would be a reasonable setback. So an increase to 10 metres, we certainly would welcome that. The other thing about I think the stabilisation works, that, you know, it's imperative that it's carried out before any other works on any of the site occurs, because that building is just sort of holding on by you know, a little tiny block of worn out limestone, and any further any heavy works or anything around it, it's likely not to survive whatsoever. With regards to the additional work that the City of Rockingham have suggested, sort of preserving the chimneys, it's quite a lot of intervention to do that. I mean, and whether it's a good idea or not, it's sort of by the by, really. Sort of, all the chimneys are strapped, and then there was a lot of intervention internally and into the building to stabilise them. However, we wouldn't oppose it, but we felt that the less intervention proposal was better.
And do you have any comments to make in relation to what has been sent today from the applicant in relation to fencing, their plan and fencing, and city? You've talked about a 2-metre fence, but there's been some different positions on the scale. And then could you also speak further on the stabilisation in the context of the comments by the applicant, the heritage applicant, that other works that occur outside of the memorial area would not impact the ruins? So can you speak further to those two elements you've just spoken about?
So with regards to stabilisation and works outside of the memorial area, the cottage actually needs to have the work done to it prior to any work on the whole site. I think any sort of ground disturbance, could impact this cottage. If we're to retain what little is left of it, I think that work is imperative that happens first. The fencing, like I said, it is, again, it is still within the memorial area, and we felt that was sufficient space, proposed the 2 metres, that was sufficient to protect the building, but any more would be, I think, would be the preference, like I said.
Okay. There's no further comments at this juncture. We will go to panel members. Panel members, do you have any questions? You can ask questions to the officers attending here, or you can revert back to questions from to the applicant should you wish. Are there any questions from panel members? Yes.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm going to go to the easy issue first, hopefully. The applicants indicated concern about conditions 12, 13 and 14, which relate to the APT easement. I think there is some support for removal of condition 12, 13, but not so condition 14. Can you sort of indicate why you have a different position on 14?
So that is correct. We agree with the outcomes associated with condition 12. The initial proposition was to remove the condition altogether, but the applicant and as an advice note, acknowledging that condition 6 has links to having fencing approved in consultation with APA, along with landscaping, be covered with that condition 6 and advice note, moving from condition 14 into advice note.
So just to clarify, so if the conditions were to be deleted for the
advice
advice note, that would be okay?
Covered by condition 6.
Initially,
just before you go on, are you making that comment in reference to condition 12 and 13? I didn't quite catch.
Condition 12 can be removed altogether without the need for an advice note. Condition 13 is an advice note, and condition 14 is an advice note.
I could just say, from a city's viewpoint, when we do referrals to agencies like APA, they came back to us with a whole swagger of conditions, a lot more than what's actually included in this report. We did a filter initially on their advice, and those are the conditions that we initially came up with. From a city's viewpoint, whether the conditions or advice notes, it probably doesn't impact on the city, has more of an impact on APA. And we feel satisfied that either way, these matters will be addressed. just didn't want to ensure that there isn't any encroachment into the easement with earthworks. That was probably the main thing, or stockpiling materials that goes into the easement area for whatever reason. So, but the discussion I think is good. If there is an advice note to these effects, I think it serves the right purpose.
Thank you, and thank you for the clarification. My view about these things, it's a bit like Jura-proof for clearing. We often include an advice note, but the regulations are very clear. It's their responsibility, and I don't see this much different, in all honesty, that the third-party approval required, and that's their obligation. The advice note just makes it perfectly clear, so I would support that. The other question I have, Presiding Member, if I could continue, and noting the strong concerns about impact of works on the ruins. From a layman's perspective, the memorial, I would have thought, has been set to recognise that area that may impact on the cottage and the ruins. Wasn't that part of the intent?
I think I can't speak specifically to what the intent was behind the memorial area, but I would imagine that the memorial area, as has been advised, is that it's influenced by what heritage documentation there is, documentary evidence about what the place is, and it wasn't just the building, the actual cottage, but it was also the barn. It was areas like the toilet, where the well might be located, and all these things were identified through a conservation management plan. And that, I think, informed the opinion in relation to where the memorial area should be. The cottage also historically had a strong connection to Mandurah Road, because a number of cottages in that area in East Rockingham were formed along Mandurah Road. So there was a strong, I think, connection made between the cottage and the road, because there was an intrinsic historical connection between the two, and that was reflected in the memorial area itself. So yeah, there's probably a number of reasons why the memorial area is as it is. But that's not to say that any development that happens adjacent to the memorial area can just go ahead, because it still needs to be considered in terms of its impact on the heritage values of that place, because any development can overpower it, any development can be too far in front of it. But in this case, there's a good approach, because it's basically a parking area around it. So we support the approach, but there needs to be a respectful distance in terms of fencing and consideration to construction close to the building.
Okay, thank you. And focus on the conditions that the applicant's unhappy with. And the suggestion is that those conditions 16 to 21 focus on the memorial area. And in my mind, that's sort of a due regard type consideration. So the suggestion from the officers is that that should be more extensive. And I'm trying to understand why it needs to be more extensive than simply the memorial area.
I think, yep, Chloe will.
Can I just add, I think it's more that we are concerned that the work won't happen.
Sorry, Sadie?
If the stabilisation work and the fencing and things won't happen if we take it out of the whole project. And I think the thing is that it needs to have a condition that this work is carried out, the stabilisation of things is carried out before any other work happens.
Okay,
so
I can understand that, but that's a separate.
Yeah, so the rest of the
separate condition that's not addressed.
They could be contained within that memorial. It's just the actual timeline. More of a concern.
Well, as it stands now, there's no timeline condition as you put. Are you suggesting that is required?
Can I maybe add to that if I could? There were two reasons for it. One was the construction activity in proximity to the actual ruin that's in perilous condition at the moment, and So if conservation works are delayed for 5 years, for example, or for 4 years, and happen right at the end, there'll be further deterioration of the existing structure without a roof. So you're talking about weather damage of rain and other conditions that could also add to the deterioration of the structure, which would then trigger potentially then more of the building fabric being removed, even though we're looking at potentially saving a large part of it now. That might not be the case in a couple of years' time. So we've already seen parts of the walls crumble and fall, even in a fairly short duration of time. So our strong concern is about the fragility of the existing structure, the proximity of the works occurring in relation to it, and that is also outside the memorial area, because you're going to have heavy vehicle movements that will cause vibration by coming onto the site. You'll have heavy materials, beams coming down onto the ground, and it's just the overall construction impact that we are genuinely concerned about for what is a ruin.
I might just add quickly, like based on the memorial, that memorial was done some 20 years ago, and the condition was different to what it is now. Over that time, the condition of the building has deteriorated further. So if anything, you could make an argument, or consider it from the city's perspective, we've taken added risk in terms of what has happened over the last 23 years. Based on that, in terms of the negligence of the building to date, it's more appropriate to manage, I guess, any construction work in situ rather than being done as potentially a final stage. Now, if there was a baseline assessment in terms of a vibration report, then maybe there might have been some comfort in this room from DPLH and the city that development within the works, within the memorial is sufficient. But there's been no technical detail that demonstrates that. It's simply a heritage architect stating that they're comfortable that works within the curtilage is sufficient. So we've taken a proactive approach, and we consider that it's appropriate to undertake the works immediately up front, and the vibration report would dictate, I guess, the outcomes of that it's twofold. You're looking at construction impact and also heritage visual impact. So that two things that are intrinsically linked. If the vibration report was to find, for example, hypothetically, let's say 2 meters was sufficient, that doesn't necessarily mean that the curtilage should be confined to 2 meters.
So just on that issue, following up directly from your question, the conditions that we're referring to are essentially 16, 17, etc. Most of those refer to documentation being provided to you. They don't speak to certain things happening, physically happening, before, which is what, Chloe, you were referring to. And the applicants obviously made a series of comments in relation to these conditions, but as the conditions are currently written, they don't seem to say you have to do something first before you do anything else, as in physically work on site. Do you have any comments on that?
I think the condition 18 does require more archaeological assessment to occur. And
I got the impression that you were talking about something.
Yes, I mean, ideally we would like stabilisation. Try and think back whether we had, in the prior advice we gave Hocking, that it was meant to occur. Check that. But my big concern is that it just, if we take it out of this, it just might not happen. Do you agree with this?
Yeah, so what we've done, and I mentioned this before, we've tried to complement conditions, and condition 18 as proposed by the department officers we thought didn't drill down into the detail, but its intent is clear if you read the advice in terms of condition 1. second sentence that refers to the construction management plan, it requires that to be done in terms of any commencement of works on site. So we would like to see those work occur up front, rather than leaving it to a later stage when I guess we don't know what the risk of further deterioration over that time is going to be, or whether it will be implemented at all.
Okay. Any further questions? I have a question about condition D. Right. Could you provide some further comment? The applicants made a comment in relation to this being all civil works contained within the site. Can you add anything further to that? As I understand, the city opposes it due to concerns about stormwater pipe and soak wells and impacting on the road surface. Can you talk to that further?
I'm not a stormwater expert, but we initially, before these conditions have been presented, there was also, I guess, a challenge on condition 5, which was the delivery of the stormwater management plan. That's fallen away, but we effectively think that those two plans being submitted as part of a building permit application and linked and need to be considered as either satisfaction of two conditions as one document, because clearly there is a connection between the stormwater and the grades for the driveway or road, and we just want to be satisfied that there won't be any issues in terms of stormwater management related to that road. So that report we consider that those two conditions can be satisfied as a one hit by engaging a suitable qualified engineer. We can provide that works.
Okay. Panel members, are there any other?
Just one clarification. Having listened to what the applicants outlined in comments from the city's officers, conditions 16 to 21 seem to address the issues that the city thinks are important to preserve what's there and prevent further deterioration. Is the issue simply about timing and the extent? Just listening to that, it seems like the vibration management plan that you've referred to is included, as reference to chimney. So they're very detailed conditions. It's just a question of what area they apply to and what timing. Is that a fair conclusion?
Yes, I think so. I mean, condition 17 referred to the vibration impact assessment occurring prior to applying for a building permit, as opposed to the applicant's suggestion it should be prior to commencement of works within the memorial area. So for us, you need to understand, there needs to be guided by an expert in relation to predicting what the impacts are going to be. And if it means that the impacts are larger than what we all think, then that might change the program of works, or at least it will protect the building because it will be known, and that information can be shared. So for us, it's about doing some preventative investigations to work out what the actual impacts of the development are going to have, and let that guide the approach.
I just point out that as part of the assessment process for the RFI, we did recommend that be provided before the city makes a recommendation. Because if we had that baseline assessment right now, there would have been some certainty around, I guess, garrison fence setback in terms of construction impact. And that way we would have had a good understanding, and maybe there could have been alignment in terms of the wording in relation to condition 16 to 21.
But we do accept that there is no condition that requires the actual work to be done up front. And that's actually a good point from Chloe. In retrospect, we probably should have thought that through a bit further in relation to the condition setting before you. Our main focus was just making sure that the works themselves around the heritage place, will not be adversely affected. But we'd certainly encourage the proponent to do whatever work that they can do in the meantime to understand further the work that they need to do, and also to actually start the work itself, the conservation works, which would certainly encourage sooner rather than later.
Okay. Members, are there any further questions at this juncture to city officers or DPLH? If not, we'll move back to the agenda. There's a recommendation in the agenda. Is there a mover of the recommendation in the agenda as written? There's no mover. This will lapse and we will need an alternate.
Presiding member, I will move it.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder for the item for the motion?
I'll second it.
It is seconded. Would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, presiding member. In terms of the majority of the development, it clearly within an industrial zone and the sort of uses proposed like that. The development also is consistent with similar industrial activity in the locality. So from that perspective, the context is correct. Obviously, most of the discussion this morning has been around potential impacts of the industrial activity on Bell's Cottage and the associated ruins. And there seems to be agreement generally about what's required. In the conditions, as I indicated earlier through the discussion, are very detailed and I think seem to address what is important in trying to preserve and recognise the historical ruins on site. The issue seems to be about almost extent of buffer, or whether we're talking about the whole of the site, what triggers it, or whether it's simply the memorial. In my mind, there's been a process of determining the memorial, and in my mind, that's what these conditions relate to, should relate to. So I would foreshadow a change to a number of the conditions, and you're happy for me to address those
Yes,
now?
you can. Yep.
In terms of condition 6, the applicant, presiding member, individually.
Individually, yeah.
So I would move applicant's request in terms of condition 6, which is fairly straightforward, to remove the reference to tiered, which the city's officers have accepted as reasonable. So given there's agreement, simple modification to remove in condition 6 the words tiered.
Is there a seconder for amendment 1?
Yes.
It is seconded, Jean Coltas. Would you like to speak further to it?
No, presiding member.
Would the seconder like to speak to amendment 1?
No, it's agreed to by the council staff.
Any other speakers to amendment 1? I will speak to amendment 1. I'm supportive of that minor change. It doesn't significantly alter the, well, it doesn't alter the delivery of the landscaping plan. Does anyone wants to speak to amendment 1? If not, would you like to close?
No further comment, presiding member.
Going to the vote, all those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Would you like to continue speaking?
Yes. The next, and I'd just maybe in block if you're agreeable to this, in terms of conditions, condition 12, that condition be deleted, and the city's officers have indicated support for that, and that conditions 13 and 14 be deleted and replaced as advisory notes.
So this is Amendment 2. There are 3 conditions relating to Amendment 2, and that is deletion of condition 12 and condition 13 being deleted and moved to an advice note, and condition 14 deleted and removed to an advice note. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a seconder for Amendment 2? Is it seconded? Member Mark Jones, would you like to continue speaking?
Thank you, Presiding Member. As I indicated earlier, effectively those conditions require the consent of a third party, and in terms of our DAP's ability to impose conditions, it can't impose a condition on a third party, so the condition really has no substance and can't be enforced. So I would suggest more appropriate that they would be dealt with as advisory notes.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to Amendment 2?
Just briefly agree with that as well. Yeah, they're basically to protect the gas pipeline, and the easement isn't controlled by the city, so I'd support those being advice notes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on Amendment 2?
No.
I'll speak to Amendment 2. I concur with the comments. The intention, understand the intention of the provision, agree that the condition 12 and the support of the city and the comments of the city in relation to the obligations of the applicant in relation to the gas pipeline and the approvals necessary under other parties. That's my comment. Is there any other speakers who wish to speak on Amendment 2? Would you have a right to reply and close the debate?
No further comment.
We are going to the vote on Amendment 2. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Back to yourself.
Presiding Member. The next modifications relate to condition 16, 17, 18, 19 and 21.
Okay, you're going to deal with those individually. That would be preferable from my perspective. Yep.
Although they all relate to the same issue, and that is the reference to the more area, but I'm guided by you. So, okay, so condition 16.
Yep.
Proposing that the words as suggested by the applicant, that prior to commencement of any works within the memorial area, so obviously it has an impact on when construction should be initiated. Seek a seconder before.
Okay, is there a seconder for this amendment?
Seconded.
Seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Presiding Member. The applicant in submission has indicated that it's unreasonable to apply the condition over the whole of the site when the heritage issues predominantly relate to the memorial area. And if you look at the applicant's plan that shows the areas of significance, quite clear that it's confined to the memorial area. Whilst there is the potential for some impact, I think it's an unreasonable requirement to prevent the applicant from progressing works on the balance of the site. So that's the reason for supporting that.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Yes, I tend to agree. There's quite a substantial buffer around the the cottage in the memorial area. I think that the requirements, I think that the plans and information to be provided for works outside of the area will indicate fairly quickly whether it's likely to have some impact on the ruins. We don't have a condition requiring the re-establishment or the works to improve the ruins at the moment prior to any works on site. And I think that given that there's a lot of work in the construction of the buildings well away from the ruins, that I think that the requirements for all of this to happen prior to any works within the memorial area is a bit onerous.
Any other speakers in relation to this? Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So we're talking about condition 16?
Yes.
And
18.
16 of the, sorry? That was 16 you've moved.
prior to applying for a building permit and
Oh,
managing.
sorry, yes, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so,
Yes.
so 16?
Yes.
16.
To me, 16, 17, they're all sort of tied in. I just wanted to ask a question. I just want to know, can I ask what the city officers think about this idea? Because what I'm concerned about the fragility and the proximity. And so I understood that we were trying to get the conservation works done sort of early on in order to be proactive in terms of ensuring no further degradation of the ruin. So what's being suggested now, I'm gathering, is that we don't have any requirement where stuff's got to be done before applying for a building permit. So I understood that we put these conditions, and a lot of it's tied into the building permit, to get these things looked at early on before work's being done on the rest of the site, the hard stand area, etc. Is that a reason?
There's two separate things. That's what the officers have indicated. Officers from CPLH have indicated the works to occur. So these are conditions for information to be given prior to building permit, and the department indicated considering the concern in relation to the ruins was works to occur, stabilisation works to occur
on the ruin.
On the ruin. This
Right.
condition relates to principally the fencing.
Sorry, I thought we were dealing with condition 17 there anyway.
Well, we're dealing with condition 16.
Okay, all right. Well, I still
So
just dealing with condition 16 at the moment.
yeah, and they're looking to delete the garrison fence being set back a minimum of 10 metres. We're looking to delete that.
The only change that was written was prior to the commencement of works. There's been no discussion about the garrison fence distance.
Yeah, my numbering seems to be.
It's to relocate the garrison fence an additional 2 metres away from the existing fence line.
So that's what, okay, look, we've backtracked. That's what the applicant has requested.
Yeah.
The notes that I've taken, and you can clarify, seeing though you've moved it, what was the movement of the amendment?
Yeah. Presiding member, I've kept it simple for the time being, and I've simply made my motion around the memorial area. The other parts of 1 and 2, I haven't suggested changes.
So the motion that's being moved is just dealing with prior to commencement of any work within the memorial, and it does not deal with the garrison fence setback.
No.
That is still contained within the condition 16 as written at the beginning of the agenda. That's what's been moved onto the table, just that.
Okay, and I'll seconding that.
Okay, so we're speaking on condition 16. It's
Yeah.
the timing, it's the issue of timing of the submission of development plans. Being building permit, and it's being removed, the movement on the table is commencement of works in the memorial area.
Yeah.
Okay, did you want to continue speaking?
No, I'm just trying to get my head around it, thanks.
Any further speakers on this motion? I will speak to the motion. In this particular instance, I don't necessarily have concerns being the movement of the works to commencement of works. I don't agree with either of the second part of it, of either the applicant or the cities. But I'll come back to that because you're not moving any of that at the moment. In this particular condition, I don't have a problem that the fencing around the ruins is dealt with prior to any commencement of works on the memorial, within the memorial. I don't think that alters the bigger issue that we've got. I don't have any concerns with the motion. Would any other speakers on the motion? Would you like to close your motion?
No further comment, presiding member.
Okay, so for the minute taker, 16 is just at the preamble to it, being prior to commencement of any works within the memorial area. So that's the only change that's being moved at the moment. We're putting that to the vote. All those in favour? So that's carried unanimously. Okay, would you like to continue?
Thank you. The next change is similar, condition 17. So it currently reads, prior to applying for a building permit, a construction management plan must be submitted. So what I'm suggesting is prior to commencement of any works within the memorial area, construction management plan must be submitted.
Is there a seconder for this change?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Seconded Jean Coltas. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, presiding member. Very briefly, same principle applies. I believe it's unreasonable requirement to prevent any progress of the development on the site, but I think it should be applied when there's works proposed within the memorial area.
Would the seconder like to speak to it?
Just reiterating what I said before, the plans for works outside of the memorial area will inform likely impacts on the internal part of the ruins, and I think that it would be picked up fairly quickly by council if there's any undue amount of vibration or work that's going to happen before within the memorial area.
Any other speakers on this amendment?
Can I just, yes, please, if I may?
Yes.
Look, I'm just trying to get my head around the fact that we're trying to make sure, well, the intention of a lot of the conditions from the city staff were to make sure that there's some protections in place on the ruin before the outside and wider construction works go on, because what we've talked before about how, you know, the sub base and the hard stand area and all that sort of impact and vibration that will happen there. So I'm looking at this now thinking, well, we were trying to get all this stuff sorted out and hopefully the restorations conservation work done early on before all that sort of heavy vibration earthworks was going to happen to do with the outside the area, outside the curtilage area, outside, i.e. the, you know, the hard stand and all the other stuff the proponent wants to do. So this is why I'm sort of having trouble with getting my head around what's being proposed, because to me it's maybe I'm missing something, but it's looking like all the provisions we've put in there to try and protect the you know, the vulnerability, the fragility, and the, you know, given the proximity of the Bell Cottage and the ruins, etc., is sort of going to go out the window with these. If we remove these, like these changes, and remove these conditions. Am I reading it wrong? Am I missing something? Not missing.
So there's different views that have been expressed today in relation to.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is being said. I'm just trying to get my head around that there seems to be different views. Yeah, I sort of make sure I'm on the understanding what's being proposed.
Yes. So, yes, there's been different views expressed.
Right. Well, at this, yeah, okay.
Okay. Any other speakers? Sorry, is that your Councillor Mark Jones? Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, so I guess it was a point of almost clarification, but we're saying the memorial area, which is the bigger area around the ruin, that's triggering when works need to happen there, not just the building permit, but any earthworks, that would trigger all these conditions. So they could apply for a building permit outside of the memorial area or do works, and it wouldn't trigger these conditions. So I guess that's the difference, which I'm comfortable with because it's a fairly large site. I guess the memorial area was established with good principles in place to try and protect it. So that's where the conditions being changed to not require some of these conditions being enacted until works are happening closer to the ruin as per the memorial area boundary. So I support the amendment.
Any other speakers? I will speak to the item, the motion. In this particular instance, I don't support the motion, the amendment. And the reason for not supporting it is there are some significant works that are associated with the construction management plan. Most significantly, from my perspective, is the vibration impact assessment. I think that is an important one that speaks to the stability of the ruins. And having heard what I've heard today, I think in the absence of having some clarity around that and in some absence about having some clarity around actual timing of the works within the memorial, I have some concerns that the significance of the site can be impacted by the development being able to undertake its construction works, all associated works, with no works occurring on the memorial site, particularly in relation to the stability of it. So from my perspective, I understand the intent of the change, but vibration impact assessment would have a significant bearing, as indicated by city officers today, about understanding the fragility of, additional fragility of the subject site of the ruins. So I do have some concerns about making the change on this particular provision. I think this is one that is important for ensuring that those elements that are important are retained. Those are my comments on it. If there are no other comments, I move back to move for right of reply and close off debate.
I will make some comments and clarification. The change I've made or suggested, I don't do lightly, and it's not of ignorance of the heritage values. Quite the opposite. We've got a due regard requirement in terms of the memorial. That's been set out over many, many years. There's legislative requirements associated with that the current owner needs to comply with. So irrespective of this development approval, there are obligations on the applicant under the heritage legislation. I'd also like to clarify there is no, certainly under the current conditions, there is no intent to have any works, and the RAR doesn't suggest that, nor has the applicant suggested any works associated with restoration of the Bell Cottage or the ruins before anything else occurs. So the suggestion, if there has been a suggestion, it's a bit misplaced, because certainly the intent in the RAR and by the applicant that there aren't works to happen on the ruins before anything else. So what we've got before us is what we are to consider. So on that basis, I'm comfortable that we should have higher due regard to what the memorial and the legislation associated with that. And I would reiterate my view to amend condition 17 to refer only to the memorial area.
Right of reply has been had. We are going to the vote on condition 17, which is at the preamble at the beginning of it, is the change is prior to commencement of any works within the memorial area. So that's what's going to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried 3-2. Back to yourself.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I will be making the same suggested change to condition 18, which once again refers to commencement, prior to commencement of any works, and replace that prior to commencement of any works within the memorial area. This condition sets out archaeological investigation survey of the ruin, and as we've already heard, a lot of work's already been done. I don't see that the work being carried out on the balance of the site prevents this from being undertaken, so I think timing is appropriate.
Is there a seconder for this amendment?
I'll second that.
It is seconded. Member Jean Colthouse, would you like to continue to speak to?
Thank you. Presiding Member, the same comments apply. In my mind, we have a memorial area that is part of the legislation, it's part of the title, and is appropriate for the decision maker to have due regard when not only considering the application, but also considering the application of conditions.
Would the seconder like to speak to the amendment?
That's to 19?
Condition 18.
18, sorry, yes. Yeah, once again, there'll be considerable work held up if there's a requirement to undertake additional investigations within the memorial area. So I'm supporting the proposal.
Are there any other speakers on?
Sorry, we're just changing the wording on 18, not the balance as requested by the applicant.
That's all that's been moved.
Okay, good.
Yes, would anybody else like to speak to amendment or condition 18?
I'd like to speak to it. Look, I won't be supporting this amendment because I'm looking at a big picture and I just are seeing stripped away the protections that we've tried to get in there to protect this particular area. I understand you've got all these other requirements through Heritage Council, but this is sort of construction and planning coming in as well. So I'm just not comfortable with it. So I won't be supporting it.
Any other speakers on the amendment? I will speak to the amendment. In this particular instance, the archaeological works, I'm satisfied are matters rarely contained within the memorial area. We had some information in relation to that. I have already indicated my concerns about element that has impact directly on the, in my view, has impact on the stability or structural stability of the ruins. In this particular instance, the archaeologist information in relation to this site, I don't think is affected by the timing of it in either being commencement of work or commencement of work within the memorial area. So I don't have a problem with this particular one. Is there any further speakers in relation to this amendment? Back to you.
Further comment.
We are dealing with amendment 4. All those in favour? Against? Carried 4-1. Back to yourself.
Thank you, Presiding Member. The next motion relates to condition 19. And once again, the current reference is prior to application for a building permit. And I'm proposing a motion that changes that to prior to commencement of any works within the memorial area. once again, this work is about archival record. And whilst it's important, I don't see why this needs to be prevented by other works on the balance of the site.
Is there a seconder for this amendment? It is seconded. Member Mark Jones, would you like to continue speaking to it?
Thank you, Presiding Member. As I've already indicated, whilst the works are important, nominated in the condition, I don't see that the potential progressing of works over balance of the site, and it is a big site, would in any way diminish the value of the work that's required under the condition.
Would the seconder like to speak to this amendment?
I just agree as well. I mean, these are areas within that memorial which are going to get developed, but it's so just getting an archival record can happen prior to that construction commencing. So it's yeah, support the amendment. Thank you.
Any other speakers on the archival on modification to condition 19 and the archival record?
Yes, I think that there's already quite a substantive body of work on the archival record of the site. I think that this would be supplementary to a lot of work that's been done to date, and to hold up the issue of a building licence for the completion of that, I think would be unwarranted. So I'm supporting the change so that any commencement of works inside the memorial area.
Any other speakers on this amendment? From my perspective, I have the archival record needs to be done in accordance with the Heritage Council provisions. From my perspective, I have no issues with the change of timing in this particular instance. Back to yourself. Is there any other speakers? Okay, back to yourself.
No further comment, Presiding Member.
We're going to the vote on Amendment 5, which is condition 19. It's prior to commencement of any works within the memorial, rather than prior to a application for a building permit. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Back to yourself.
Thank you. Presiding Member, the final change, and its consistent theme, condition 21, once again requires heritage interpretation plan prepared by a heritage consultant submitted to the Heritage Council of Western Australia. Once again, important work that needs to be carried out. Does it need to be carried out prior to any works on site or a building permit? In my view, it's not necessary. It's an unreasonable impasse, particularly given what we heard this morning from the applicant in terms of the work that's been done by their group and others. So I would move to include the reference to commencement of any works within the memorial area.
Within the memorial area. Okay, so amendment 6 is condition 20, and it's commencement at the commencement of the works, did you say? So prior to applying for a building permit, you're saying prior to the commencement of works within the memorial area.
Correct.
Okay, is there a seconder for this change? I will move this as seconder. Would you like to continue speaking to it?
Presiding Member, just to add that, as I said in my preface comments, that in important body of work which has already been advanced by the applicant, and it's unreasonable to hold that or require a private building permit.
I am comfortable that in this particular instance, the works can occur prior to any work. These activity, the conservation management plan can occur prior to works within the memorial area. I don't think that changes the significant obligation. Is there any other speakers? Yes, Councillor Mark Jones.
Yeah, just in this regard, I'm actually speaking against it because I believe that we've heard from city staff and the that we want the conservation works done, as soon as possible, because there has been a lot of, I guess, damage, done to the ruin. So I guess that's why I'd prefer that this would actually happen, either commencement of site works over the whole site or the building permit, just to conserve what's currently there for the ruin. So thank you.
Any other speakers on this? Yes.
I concur with Councillor Jones. This has been one of my main concerns. That is the fragility of the building, and of course, in this requirement, here's the bracing of the two chimneys and other work. So that will helpfully by keeping this in there. Will go to alleviating some of my other concerns that I've raised earlier with the other conditions.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers on this amendment?
Yes, I'll speak against the motion. I see condition 20 and 21 linked. Condition 20 says that prior to applying for a building permit, a heritage impact statement, option 2, the schedule of works is outlined in that, when including the bracing, the chimney, etc., and the approved conservation management strategy and schedule of conservation works must be implemented for the duration of all construction works to the satisfaction of the Heritage Council and the City of Rockingham. And I think 21 is probably linked to that because it does require that the heritage interpretation plan is submitted and approved by the Heritage Council, which is under legislation in consultation with the City of Rockingham. The approved heritage interpretation plan shall be implemented and maintained by the owner at all times thereafter. So I see that as the trigger for the conservation works to the ruins occurring during construction or simultaneous with the rest of the site.
Thank you. Any other speakers? We have the right of reply.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I think there's probably a confusion about what the intent of condition 21 implies and what condition 20, which has been referred to, is quite different. So I don't propose to add any further comment.
Thank you. We are going to the vote on condition 20, amendment 6, which is a change to the timing of the works. All those in favour? Against? It is lost 4-1. You've got the floor still.
Presiding Member, at this point, nothing further.
Okay. Is there any further speakers on the motion? I'm just trying to work out who's.
Did I speak to the as seconder? Can't recall now.
Oh, you haven't.
I have it.
On the substantive, you mean?
Yes.
No, over to you on the substantive. You've been dealing with the amendments.
Sorry, I had a vehicle just go past. I didn't hear that.
No, you haven't spoken generally to the
Okay,
substantive.
well, then I'll speak to it. Look, I think I agree with Mr. Arias that we've concentrated on one element of this proposal, a very important element, I might add. But look, given the other elements of the proposal, I think that's the most important one from the applicant's point of view, I'm sure, and that is the warehouse and offices and storage facilities on site, which I don't think present any problem from an approval process. In terms of the heritage site, it is important that at the appropriate time, the proponents accept their responsibility. They purchased the land knowing full well that there was a responsibility with some sort of legislation, and they have to perform on that. And I think that being responsible developers, they would understand that any works in and around that site are likely to impact it. And I think there is a condition there that requires them to undertake the works, if not simultaneous, then very close to the construction work that they're undertaking on the rest of the site. So I'm supporting the application and the amendments.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the substantive motion? I will speak to the substantive motion myself. I think the development's a good development for the site. It's consistent with the development that just is near it, and I note that so as identified in the plans, the existing development, which includes a number of warehousing and other activities. From my perspective, the key matter has not been around the general land use and operation of the site. I think it's a good one for the area. My biggest concern has been, and reflected in the conversation today, has been around the memorial and the extent of works, and attempting to balance the two provisions in terms of the applicant's ability to commence some form of development with recognising some of the delicacies around the stability of the ruins. Based on the material that we've had and the discussion that's been had today, I am comfortable that some of those amendment changes will not affect the proposal, but that the key ones around the stability of the ruins have been included as consideration for as priority works in relation to this proposal. It is a difficult site. It's already been indicated. The memorial is listed on the title. The applicant, I think, has gone a long way to looking to create a development that's appropriate for the site, including Hardstand, which has some challenges in relation to its construction, but does provide good visibility from the public domain into the site, noting that it is on a road that's of a reasonable speed. But overall, I think this development is appropriate. Just some further work is required in relation to the ruins. I would acknowledge the city officers and say that I would also acknowledge that your comments in relation to additional material which would have been helpful in refining down some of the provisions in here, particularly things like the archival record and such. And I think that, the vibration impact assessment, and I think that that's significant in relation to this particular site, that there are a series of additional investigations that are necessary for all of those matters to be determined, and the extent of those to be clear in relation to the ruins. I'd also thank the officers from DPLH. You have provided some significant input in relation to the works and the concerns you have around the timing of the work. Those are my comments. Any other speakers on the substantive motion? If there are no other speakers, we move back to the mover for right of reply and close of debate.
Thank you, presiding member. I don't propose to prolong my comments too long. I think the general acceptance that the industrial component of this development is appropriate based on zoning site. Issue of heritage, I get the sense that the council's not completely comfortable, and clearly the applicant's completely comfortable where we've landed. And probably a number of members aren't particularly. But I think it does still require some work between the applicant and the city's officers, and it is difficult in a forum like this to get to that level of agreement and that level of detail. But having said that, I think the intent is there. I think everyone in this room recognise the importance of the Bell Cottage and the associated ruins. And I would also add, there is existing heritage legislation that's in place for good reason and can be utilised to help with what's required. So, presiding member, I'll close the debate on that and we'll appropriate go to the motion.
Debate has been closed. We are going to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimous for the minute taker. Move back to the agenda. There are no Form 2 applications and no Section 31 applications. Part D of the agenda has sat fields listed here. I won't speak to those. And accordingly, I close today's meeting at 12:49 p.m. Thank you.